Quick disclaimer before this video starts, as of writing this video right now, Help Wanted 2 just released like a week or two ago, but I'm too poor to afford it yet, so I haven't played it yet, so please do not spoil or comment anything about it in the comments below. I am not afraid to delete comments and block people. Okay, thanks, bye. Five Nights at Freddy's is such a big franchise. With over 11 games, hundreds of characters, deep, complicated lore, a movie that just came out, multiple book series, thousands of fans, and tons of online drama, you've probably at least seen something related to Fnaf and have some kind of opinions about it. Personally, I've been a huge Fnaf fan ever since it came out. It's always had a huge influence on me. Now, I was fully intending on my next video being another Sonic video. In fact, I've been working on a script for about half a year now, with the script being about looking at Sonic games that are considered bad, but it is currently over 45 pages, and that will not be done anytime soon. But I decided to put a pause on that script because I've been having a lot of thoughts about FNAF recently. Looking at quote-unquote bad games while researching that script reminded me about FNAF because, as you probably know, there are certain FNAF games that are considered absolutely atrociously terrible. Of course, I'm talking about Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, probably the most hated game in the entire franchise. There are many talking points that people bring up constantly when talking about how this game is the worst piece of shit to ever grace the FNAF franchise. But I am here to tell you that all the general consensus from fans could not be more wrong. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach is the best game in the entire franchise. Now, people have been baffled at me when I say this, but please trust me when I say that I have legitimate reasons for holding this opinion, and there are legitimate reasons for disagreeing with those popular YouTubers constantly shitting on the games. You know the ones. I'm going to go over all of this in this video, but I explain my thoughts very thoroughly, so it might take a little while to get all my thoughts across. So please keep an open mind and actually listen before angrily writing your comments about how I'm wrong. Or don't. All comments would help my engagement anyways, angry or not. Of course, all of these thoughts and opinions are my own. Everyone has their own opinions, and everyone's opinions can be very subjective. And I'm not exempt from that. But I am going to try and back up all of my arguments with evidence, reasoning, and examples. I don't want to completely misrepresent any of the opposing opinions. I'm so passionate about FNAF, and I hold a lot of opinions about it, and I've actually had people get really angry at me and insult my intelligence and just generally have rude behavior towards me for simply saying, hey, I actually don't think that the games or the movies or the books or any of that is shit, and in fact I think it's very good. Anyways, my biggest hope is to be civil and respectful of people regardless of differing opinions, and I hope that those viewing my videos are mature enough to do the same. Though, when it comes to the FNAF fandom, that can seem like an impossible task, since many of the FNAF fans are really young and emotional little kids. Just keep in mind that it's insulting to assume anyone who doesn't hold the same opinion as you is uncritically thinking baby, okay? So with all of that out of the way, let's get started with our discussion about why Security Breach is actually a great game. I have been thinking a lot recently about what distinguishes a game's quality from being good or from being bad. Now, I've already written a few pages about this topic for that aforementioned Sonic script, and I don't want to just copy-paste everything I've said in 2 videos, even if that one's not actually out yet, so I want to keep this section very brief. When we actually get to describing Security Breach and its elements, I want to delve more into specifics, but for now, let's examine a few basics. First of all, people have to understand that there is a difference between liking something and its actual quality. The quality refers to how well crafted all of the parts of the game are. Liking it just comes down to your own personal enjoyment. It's possible to like bad games, and it's also possible to dislike good games. I want to get this out of the way because I've had people tell me, just because you like Security Breach doesn't mean that it's a good game. Hey, listen to me. I'm fucking grabbing you by the shoulders and staring you directly in the eyes. Please look at me when I say this. I 100% understand this. And I actually agree with you. Just because I like it doesn't say anything about its quality. So I need you to understand that I am talking about the game's quality when I say the game is good. There are reasons why I think this, and I will explain them all with examples, so please get it through your head right now that this isn't just a bad game that I happen to enjoy. I am arguing that this is a well-made, good quality game. Got that? Good. We can move on to the real question of what makes a game good or bad now. This is essential to being on the same page when we actually discuss the game. Words like good and bad are actually incredibly subjective, so everyone has their own interpretations about what makes a game qualify as one of those two things. So for the sake of this video, let me talk about what I think about when I am determining if a game is good or bad. Almost like a puzzle, games, and all pieces of media in general, are sums of their parts. There are a ton of different elements that go into making a game. The writing, the story, the gameplay, the art, the characters, the music, etc. All of these pieces work together to make the game, so they're all very important. To determine if a game is good or not, you have to evaluate the whole game by looking at each of its parts. Some parts of a game might be more well-honed than other parts of it. Maybe a game has bad writing, but good gameplay. Maybe it has bad art, but it has good characters. Just some examples. However, just because one part of a game is bad, does not mean that the entire thing is bad. To me, you have to evaluate how much of the game is good versus bad. A game might have one negative element, but if the rest of it is masterfully crafted, I think most people will agree that it's a great game despite having some flawed parts. It's impossible to have a perfect game, of course, but rarely you'll find an excellent game where almost all of its parts are wonderfully made. Now, some people will disagree with that. For example, I've seen some gamers say, the gameplay is the element that should be most prioritized because it's a game, so if the gameplay bad, then the whole game is ruined. I think it's cool to have your own opinions about what makes a good game, and I respect that, but I also very much disagree with that point of view, because games are more than just gameplay. If you diminish the efforts of the artists, musicians, writers, etc. on a game, it kinda shows a misunderstanding of what games are all about. They are a collaboration between all the different people who worked on different facets of a game, and without visuals or writing or any other game elements, no matter how good your game programming is, a game won't be good unless there are other elements to contribute to it. Like, your game probably won't be as good as it could be if you don't hire any artists or musicians or writers. Gamers nowadays look at a game and say, oh, this thing has a few bugs in it? 0 out of 10, horrible game! Look, back in my day, we played Sonic 06 and we liked it. Grow a pair! All that being said, I do also think that it's possible for one element to be so extreme that it could ruin or make the rest of the game. For example, I've definitely seen some games with beautiful environments and competent gameplay, but because the story was so atrociously awful to an extreme amount, it ruined the rest of the game. Too long didn't read. To determine if a game is good or not, look at the quality of each of its elements. It's a little subjective to determine if a game is good or not, but that's okay. Good and bad are subjective qualities after all. Now, it's well known that Five Nights at Freddy's is a franchise that is very, very complicated. Like, if I were to sit here and explain the entire lore to you, we would be here for over an hour, so let's not spend 20 bajillion hours talking about all the background information in Fnaf ever. But there are some things that you need to know in order to truly understand security breach in context. Because I know there are a lot of people who maybe didn't keep up with Fnaf over the years, and because of that, they got confused by some of the things in Security Breach and ended up not liking it. But it really does make sense in the greater context of the series as a whole. However, before we talk about any of that, there's some drama that I feel like we have to address. Let's talk about Scott Cawthon. Now, I know what some of y'all are thinking. Sparkell, just talk about the fucking game already! Why do you need to establish so much context, and why do you even need to talk about the Scott drama when it's not all that relevant to Security Breach? I'll tell you why. Because it's a common belief that because Scott is a bad person and he made Fnaf, it's immoral to like Fnaf at all. For those not in the know, Scott Cawthon is the guy who originally created Fnaf. And there was a lot of drama around the time Security Breach came out because people looked at records and found out that he had been donating a lot of his money to Republican candidates, including people like Donald Trump. Now, Scott being a Republican and a Christian is no secret. People have known about that for years. But there was a lot of backlash because in the US, a lot of the Republican candidates have been pushing for truly evil causes. Trump, for example, is pretty racist and wants to deport people and build a wall on the border of Mexico, has allegedly broken many laws, committed fraud and assault against people. Yikes. And also he is, of course, homophobic and transphobic. A lot of Republican legislators at the time had been pushing for criminalization of trans or queer people, with many Republicans being so hateful that they wanted all of them to die. Now, it's important to note that Scott claims to love all of his fans, regardless if they're gay, trans, whatever race they are, etc. And I don't doubt that he does. It's bad to take everything in bad faith, so I'm willing to take Scott at his word when he says this. However, that doesn't change the fact that a lot of his money is going to oppressing the rights of people. Now, when this all blew up, though, there were hundreds and thousands of Fnaf fans, mostly mindless children, who immediately rushed to Scott's defense. I mean, Scott Cawthon made Fnaf at Freddy's. He says he loves all his fans, so there's no way he could ever be wrong about anything, right? And unfortunately, this led to a lot of queer people and other people who had raised concerns about Scott to be harassed. People were so quick to jump to Scott's defense and spread the hashtag "Thank you, Scott Cawthon" and shit that I think a lot of, not all, but many fans just completely ignored the criticism. So I'm sure you could see why a lot of people spread the idea that, oh, Scott is a horrible person, and therefore we should boycott Fnaf. Now, I'm gonna be real honest, I am queer and trans, and it was just so incredibly disheartening to see the fandom act so childish, ignorant, and just blatantly ignoring criticism when it came to Scott Cawthon. As a Fnaf fan, I don't think it's okay to just dismiss people who dislike Scott, because like it or not, people are fallible, and Scott is not perfect. When someone does something bad, even if it's someone you like, you shouldn't just ignore it or harass people who disagree with you. That's inexcusable, and to this day, I still hold disgust for that part of the fandom. However, I do think that people saying, oh, Fnaf is 100% terrible, Scott is the worst person ever, and you should boycott Fnaf, are going a bit too far. You can hold whatever opinions you want, and I get if this incident ruined Fnaf for you, that's fair. But Scott is not comparable to, like, J.K. Rowling, one of the worst fucking people on the face of this planet. Yes, Scott is a Republican who gets money from Fnaf, and that's not good that money is going to Republican candidates. But you have to understand that there's really no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism. As much as I hate it, I assume that at least some of my money is going to Republicans from buying at certain stores or restaurants or something. You cannot exist in this country without at least some of your money going towards that, and it sucks. And at least Scott claims to love all of his fans regardless of gender or race or sexuality, even if some of his money is going towards causes that hurt those people. To me, he's like that Republican family member who might be a good person, but they're just a bit uninformed or maybe older and they have more outdated political ideas. Scott is at least a little bit better than Rowling, who has anti-Semitism and racism baked into her series lore and who actively spouts anti-trans hate speech. If you play Fnaf at Freddy, it's not gonna shove Republican ideas down your throat. Claims to be pro-life, makes a game where children die anyways. Anyways, form your own opinions. That's where I'll leave the discussion about Scott. I don't think he's the best person, but he's not bad enough to where it ruins Fnaf or whatever. Now let's get into the actual context of what you need to know about Five Nights at Freddy's before we delve into Security Breach. And yes, I am going to be covering a lot of important lore, because I have seen people think Security Breach is bad specifically because they didn't actually understand the lore of Fnaf. So it is imperative for you to understand it. You may have heard people complain that the Fnaf lore is complicated and confusing, and I can see why it might seem that way to a newcomer. However, it's actually not that difficult to understand so long as you research each of the games themselves. For the most part, it isn't too difficult to put together a definitively canon timeline of events in Fnaf. It only seems confusing because 1, there's so much of the lore, 2, a lot of the lore is hidden in obscure ways in the games, and 3, people come up with ridiculous and confusing theories, and while some are correct, many popular theories are blatantly untrue, but they get believed by a ton of people and it confuses the narrative. Just avoid map hat and game theory, please. You will be doing yourself a fucking favor. Not only is he kind of a shit person, but while his earlier theories were kinda accurate, around the point Fnaf 4 came out, he kinda went off the deep end, and a lot of his theories are just stretches, blatantly incorrect, and more. I don't think he's as well informed about Fnaf as he pretends to be. Besides MatPat, I feel like a lot of people tend to watch Fnaf theory videos that are stupid and then take it at face value, leading to people confidently telling me the silliest shit like, did you know it's a plot hole that the Aftons are British? Because they're in America and not the UK. Silly game. As if British people can't move to and live in the US? Don't act like you know William's entire fucking backstory. You have no fucking clue where his parents are from, so please shut up. And yeah, let's just go over a brief summary of the lore. Only the canon stuff and what's relevant and needed to know to understand Security Breach, for everyone's sake. Five Nights at Freddy's is a game series that takes place in the fictional restaurant franchise Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It is based on real-life restaurant chains like Showbiz Pizza or Chuck E. Cheese, being the most popular during the 80s, having pizza, games, and attractions, and of course featuring the animatronic robot mascots front and center. Worth briefly mentioning that while the Silver Eyes book series and also the Fnaf movie feature similar events and characters to the games, they are in fact in their own universes that are not canon to the games. So while we're talking specifically about the games, you should disregard the information that's in those things. I say this because people like MatPat have used book information in their game theories, resulting in theories that are blatantly incorrect because the foundation that their information from is wrong. It's not the same universe, alright? Same goes for the movie for that matter. There might be a Vanessa in the movie, but she really is different from the Vanessas that are in the games. So disregard the movies and the books for this discussion today. It's not relevant. I'm not going to explain in detail Fnaf games 1 through 6. I suggest you play them yourself before watching Security Breach content, since they're earlier games in the franchise and they establish a lot of context that makes playing Security Breach make a lot more sense. Long story short, one of the co-owners of Freddy Fazbear's Entertainment, William Afton, used one of the restaurant's empty mascot costumes, the Yellow Rabbit, which he eventually dies in, to murder children. Those children's souls possess the robots. A lot of other shit happens, especially in regards to William's family, but that's another video for another day. What is important is to look at the two games that came out before Security Breach did, Fnaf Help Wanted and Fnaf AR. Let's start with Help Wanted. We will talk a lot about this game and the events that take place in it, but please stick with me because it's really important for explaining Security Breach's villain and her themes. Fnaf Help Wanted takes place long after the original main games, and by this time you can imagine that Fazbear Entertainment has a horrible reputation. Not only does it have so many health and safety violations that it's a wonder the franchise has survived for this long without shutting down from one of its many OSHA violations, but dozens of children went missing there, now presumed dead, though their bodies were never found. In addition, some indie game developer in-universe made a series of games bringing to light all of the incidents that happened in Fnaf. That's right, Scott Cawthon is actually canon to the Fnaf universe, and in-universe, all of the Fnaf games actually exist. So all the shit he put in the games, the murder, the scary animatronics, etc., it hasn't painted a pretty picture for the Fazbear Entertainment brand. So what's the brand to do? Fazbear Entertainment ends up suing the rogue indie developer for defamation, labeling him as a crazy person spreading falsities about their company. And they win. They then decide to release a VR game, Help Wanted. This game is also canon as a game within the Fnaf universe, and it's meant to poke fun of the ghost stories and scary rumors about the company, in an attempt to make them seem so ridiculous no one could possibly believe them. And by some miracle, this fucking works! Public's perception of Fazbear Entertainment gets so good that they genuinely become popular again, and it's hinted at through the teasers inside of the game that a bigger establishment, the Security Breach Mall, may be opening soon. Now, the actual most important part is the story that is hidden throughout Help Wanted. As you're playing the game, you'll notice tapes hidden throughout. Once you collect one of these tapes, you may notice that in the main lobby hub area, sometimes a pair of eyes will be staring at you from the doorway. Now, it's so far away and in the dark that you won't be able to make out the details. The entity will make a garbled sounds at you. It's a little distorted, but if you listen closely, he's saying, "Hello, can you hear me?" If you collect more of these tapes, the entity will start to move closer and closer to where you are standing. Though at first it happens little by little, and the change might be so subtle that you probably won't even notice until much later when you realize, hey, that guy, isn't he much closer to me than he used to be? Eventually, you'll actually be able to listen to the tapes you're collecting by accessing a secret game mode, Nightmare Mode, or as I like to call it, Fucky Mode, because the game is so fucked up that I want to fucking avoid it at all costs. Within Fucky Mode, you can find a quiet, dark, secret room where you can actually listen to the tapes you've been collecting. And we hear from a character who isn't really named, so the fandom just calls her Tape Girl. I should also note that while at first the dark room is empty, the more and more tapes you collect, the more you unlock the chance that the entity stalking you appears in the room behind you, watching you and calling out to you with the "Hello, can you hear me" message. Tape Girl is a developer for the Help Wanted game, and she's leaving these tapes in the hopes that some beta tester will find them before the game goes public. You are implied to be that beta tester, but we will get more into your character's identity in a little bit. Tape Girl describes a piece of malicious code that was put into the game, left over from one of the old restaurants. That code has formed the mysterious entity which has been watching you from the door in the main hub, and the girl describes it as watching them and being in places where it shouldn't be. She also talks about one of the people working on the game named Jeremy, who starts kind of losing his mind as the game engulfs him after he sees the entity inside the game, and it is implied that the entity is somehow controlling him or getting into his mind, and he even talks to it when there's seemingly no one there, though I'm not sure if Tape Girl fully realized this at the time.
He doesn't even jump anymore. Nothing scares him. He just stands there like he's talking to someone. Sometimes he rocks from side to side. We were told to leave him alone.
Jeremy is then implied to have killed himself by cutting his face off with the guillotine paper slicer they had for work purposes. Tape Girl then tells us that she's planning on trying to get rid of the creature. She thinks that it has attached itself to the logs she's been making, so she says she's going to destroy them. It's at this point that, as the player character, you're probably thinking, well, I am listening to your logs, that clearly failed. Why the hell did I collect so many of these things when the thing is clearly attached to it?
I can't delete them. By creating a protected area to store these logs apart from the game, I effectively gave this thing a safe place to hide itself. It's in here now. I may not be able to delete it.
Well, isn't that just fucking grand? Tape Girl talks about how she can't delete the logs. She also says that the company lied and that the crazy indie developer that they sued for defamation earlier had actually been secretly hired by Fazbear Entertainment to create the games in the first place. Yeah, Fazbear Entertainment saw that their reputation was down the fucking toilet, so they pulled this big stunt for publicity's sake to try to recover some of their lost reputation. Tape Girl fears that the tapes she created are basically being used as a Trojan horse, and that assembling all of them will allow the entity to take full control. It wants to leave the game, and to do that, it wants to merge with the player character, taking control of their brain and basically using them to carry out its deeds. But Tape Girl also believes there's a way to kill it.
You have to let it begin the process of leaving through you. Then use the disconnect switch that I've embedded by the main stage. Let it approach you. Let it begin to merge with you. Play the music and flip the switch. That will cause a hard restart of the game and flush the memory, effectively killing it. I hope. I don't know when it will come for you.
So, what does this all mean? The entity described in the tapes is this guy, known as Glitchtrap. It is kind of a ghost thing, a fragment of William Afton's spirit that was connected with the piece of hardware they had installed in the game. So, while it's not the same entity as William Afton himself, it is a fragment of his ghost. You could probably see why letting it merge with you is dangerous, but our player character lets Glitchtrap merge with her anyways in an attempt to kill it. In one of the endings of the game, which we know is the canon ending due to the events that will happen later lining up with this ending, after we merge with Glitchtrap but successfully follow Tape Girl's instructions, we are transported to a room. There's a door with scratches and a handprint on it. When the sliding panel on the door is open, we can see Glitchtrap behind it. After this, when you go back to the hub of the main game, you will have a glitched out plush of Glitchtrap with you. If you are confused by this ending, it implies that Glitchtrap is now trapped, compartmentalized away. But where is he? He is now stuck inside of the player's mind. In the Halloween DLC for Help Wanted, there is a game called Chord Maze. You are stuck in a corn maze with Grim Foxy, and you can escape him by finding the keys and getting to the exit. However, there's actually 5 keys hidden throughout the entire maze, and if you're able to collect all of them and return to the cellar at the beginning of the maze, you can actually unlock it. Inside, you will find this mask. I'm just gonna say, when I first played this game, Glitch Trap and this mask's design unnerved me so much that I literally had nightmares for weeks. There's just something so eerie about the character designs. The creepy eyes, the creepy stretched smile, and the gross texture. Ugh. Anyways, if you take this mask back to the main hub and put it on before addressing the Glitch Trap plush, you will hear the player character have a conversation with Glitch Trap. Though we could only hear our player character's side of the dialogue.
Yes, I hear you. I know. No. There's no miscommunication. I understand. Yes, I have it. I made it myself. I think you would like it. No one suspects anything. Don't worry. I'll be ready. And I won't let you down. It will be fun.
So, what is this mask and what's going on here? Let's finally address the question of who our player character is. In the game file, she is referred to as the Reluctant Follower, as she is following Glitch Trap's wishes, but she is reluctant to do so. She doesn't actually want to follow what he says, but he is physically controlling her, so it's not like she has much of a choice. This player character will come to be known as Vanessa, and she will be very relevant in Security Breach as a villain, so covering this game and her origin is really important in understanding how she works and her motives. I've seen people who maybe didn't know Vanessa was in Help Wanted and thought she was just made for Security Breach, or that they didn't fully understand how she and Glitch Trap worked and they thought she was a bad villain. We're gonna talk about all of that later, so hold on to your horses till then, okay? Vanessa talks about how she understands Glitch Trap. There's no miscommunication about whatever their plan is. It will become obvious that Glitch Trap wants Vanessa to carry on his legacy. William murdered dozens of children while dressed in a rabbit suit, and now he wants her to continue on and fill the same role that he once did. She says she has something that she made herself, and that she thinks he would like it. What she's referring to here is likely about her rabbit costume. In this game, we have the mask inside of the game, and if you're confused about why it's here in the VR game, you have to understand Vanessa is some kind of employee for Fazbear Entertainment. No, she's not a night guard, I'll explain that later. We'll see more of her mentioned in AR, but it's likely that she's actually working on the game Help Wanted itself, considering that her mask is in the game. She's very skilled with technological stuff, later showing great hacking skills, but it seems as if she used Blender or something to model the rabbit mask and then hid it in the game herself. Maybe she's one of the beta testers, like the tape girl was trying to talk to. It's not 100% clear what her job is, but Vanessa will go on to sew her own rabbit costume based on the design of the mask. The last relevant plot point in Help Wanted that we have to discuss to fully understand Security Breach is actually the mobile version of Help Wanted, which came out in October of 2020. Now, I know that sounds weird. Why specifically the mobile version? Well, the mobile version of the game was broken. Not in the sense that, Steelbolt didn't know how to port it over and the controls suck, or anything like that. In-universe, the game had been hacked or broken or glitched or something. Objects in the hub area of the game have this weird glitchy effect, and if you tapped on the glitches in the prize corner enough, you could unlock a secret game. It was called Princess Quest. Now, Princess Quest will actually return in Security Breach, and I think that's where most people know it from, since if you weren't a hardcore, die-hard Fnaf fan in October of 2020 like I was, I can imagine how people might have missed it since it was in the mobile version of a game that had been released for over a year at that point. The mobile version of Princess Quest is very similar to Security Breach's Princess Quest, but there are a few major differences. In my opinion, the mobile version was a little bit cooler, and we'll get into why. Princess Quest is an arcade-style game where you play as a princess in a castle, a very traditional-seeming setup. Our princess wakes up and comments about how she feels strange. The game has a fantastic, ominous aesthetic. The music is soft, but it builds a mysterious, a little bit of a spooky feel. A lot of the areas are dark, being only illuminated by the light of our lantern and the torches that the princess lights up while navigating through the areas. The game makes use of a lot of purple, green, and yellow in its color palette, each of these colors having a very significant different meaning. Purple, famously in the Fnaf games, has always been associated with the murderer, William Afton, and therefore could be associated with Glitchtrap, though Glitchtrap is also associated with the color green, as we see him in his glitchy form in the game when he has a green body, a green plush, etc. Princess Quest enemies often have green in their color palettes. Yellow has also less so been associated with William, as yellow is the color of the Springlock suits and the costume he used to kill people, but I think it could be argued that Vanessa has become associated with the color yellow. Since most of the yellow comes from the princess herself and the light she makes, I think it's safe to say that that's what's intended by the use of yellow in this particular game. The princess begins to encounter these violent, gruesome, disturbing dark creatures, many of which look like shadows. Scarily, for anyone who knows Fnaf lore, many of them resemble rabbits. And there are even enemies that look like the princess herself, but if she were a distorted rabbit monster. Most of the game is just avoiding the enemies and solving simple puzzles, including one with 5 graves, but at times it could be super difficult just because of the sheer number of enemies. The whole feeling of the game is odd, with the princess commenting a lot about how odd she feels, like something here isn't right. The most ominous part of the game is a giant door in front of a stained red carpet, clearly looking like it's holding back something important. To unlock it, you have to solve the game's puzzles and find this creepy, glitchy key with a rabbit motif. Now, the Security Breach and Help Wanted versions are pretty much the same up until this point, with the only difference starting right here. In Security Breach, the Princess Quest games have the OST Caught in a Loop playing the entire time. That's the song that's playing right now in this video. In the mobile version, however, as soon as you enter this dark room, the music stops. Again, the atmosphere in this game is great, and it really builds up tension here as you have to walk down this long hall. And once you reach the end of the hall, there's one more torch to light. And when you do, you see that you're face to face with Glitchtrap in some horrific shadowy glitchy form. It looks like an amalgamation of the gooey distorted rabbit enemies with this huge creepy smile distorted across his face. In the mobile version, very tense, spooky horror music plays, and at this point, even if you try and turn back to run away, you can't. The area is blocked off now. In the mobile version, you hear a creepy, distorted gargling, and the area glitches out and fades to black, ending the game. Now, the creepy gargling we hear is actually a voice, and it can be assumed to be Glitchtrap himself. It's a bit distorted and slowed down, but if edited, it sounds like this. I always come back obviously represents William Afton. This is one of his signature phrases associated with him, and it is true, he does always come back in one form or another. Glitchtrap is a part of William's soul and represents him, and now he's back again. He also says, "Let me out," highlighting his desire to escape through the game. Considering that the princess in the game gets captured and consumed by Glitchtrap's darkness, it can be seen as a metaphor for how Vanessa herself is being possessed by him. Now, this will be brief, I promise. The last game that we have to talk about that has context for Security Breach is Fnaf AR. It's another mobile game that implements AR technology, with the premise that Fazbear Entertainment is sending animatronics to people's houses as a subscription service. Because that's a great idea! I actually thought it was a pretty cool game with lots of cool-ass detailed skins with a lot of attention to detail and care put into them, but I also have my criticisms of the games because it heavily tries to push you to spend money in kind of a greedy way, but the actual game isn't what we're going to look at here. Part of the game's mechanic is that it sends you a bunch of emails. These are just normal notifications like you'd get in any app. It'll tell you that you've got a notification and you can read it. Now, one of the emails you will receive if you get the game says, "Staff Advisory, Mail Server. Due to technical complications, our mail server may be directing emails to incorrect recipients. If you receive an email that is not addressed to you, please forward it to the intended recipient and notify the IT department immediately. Please do not read email that is not your own." In 2021, players did start receiving strange emails that were intended for different parties. It was also randomly sent out, adding to the mystery of it. It wasn't guaranteed if you would get an email, which emails you would get, if they would be in order, etc. Some of the emails were about different small stories. For example, some of the emails were between two people called Daniel Rocha and Anna Quemto, where Daniel asks about using power tools. Some of the emails involve a situation where Stephen Wilson finds a glitch or a virus on a circuit board that he had been told to scan, with the exchange most likely implying that glitch trap is in the company's technology or systems or something. But the most interesting emails to me are someone between Ness and Lewis. Okay, when I first played the game, I thought it was pronounced Luis because of how it was spelled, but in Security Breach, we hear him mentioned out loud, and it's actually pronounced Lewis, and I hate it so much. Anyways, Lewis begins emailing Ness about some concerning behavior she's been exhibiting at work, and I'm going to read a few excerpts. Hey Ness, I hope you're having a good day. It's no big deal, but I wanted to reach out off the radar and remind you about the company policy about personal internet usage. Nobody cares if you're online shopping, as long as you get your work done. But certain words and phrases trigger red flag reports, so your last order got automatically sent to me. Basically anything mentioning torture is going to raise the alarm. So although the Viking Blood Eagle 12-month calendar you ordered is very cool, the searches that got you there did trigger a red flag. I know I mentioned trigger words, but the AI is actually a little more sophisticated than that, and of course there are people like me watching the system too. So the word compliance by itself isn't going to set off any red flags, but the sentence, how to induce compliance in human subjects, and how to induce self-compliance, did actually get my attention. I also thought it was strange that these were immediately followed by searches that couldn't possibly have any relevant answers for you. Did you search for help by itself? Anyways, my offer still stands if you want to go over company policy. I'm free any day after work. We could grab dinner or coffee if you want. In the meantime, you might want to do some of your more interesting research at home. Hey Ness, I wanted to see if you're doing okay. I appreciate you taking my advice about red flag search terms. If I thought I'd have to file an incident report about you, I think I'd just have to quit instead. So my student loans, thank you. I do have to keep checking online activity periodically after getting a red flag report, and I was a little worried maybe something is going on with you. One day you're researching flowers and the migration patterns of bees. Fascinating, right? And the next day you type in, how far can a human being be cut in half before losing consciousness? I figured maybe you're writing a screenplay or something, but it was a little startling to see it written out. I hope you know I'm always here if you need me. I saw you order 3 lifelike human male rubber masks, and I was dying to ask what they were for. Was my screenplay guess right? Are you making a movie or putting on some kind of performance? At this point in the emails, Luis mentions actually meeting with and talking to Ness. I had no idea you were into IT stuff. I always think my job sounds so boring, but you were so interested in it made me start thinking, hey, maybe IT is cool after all. Or maybe you're just a good listener. Hey Ness, is everything okay? I came by your desk to say hi today and I don't think you even heard me. You had your face so close to the screen. That can't be good for your eyes. I know. I sound like somebody's grandma. I waited for a second to see if you would turn around, but it was like you were in another world. It must be so useful to shut out the world and focus like that. I wish I could do that. I thought you were on a conference call at first because I heard voices. Ness, if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm always here for you. I thought your hair looked nice today. The rainbow streaks brightened up the office, and the office is always in desperate need of some brightening. It's worth mentioning that a bunch of unreleased emails were data mined from the game, and these emails go much further into the story. Louise pretty much admits to liking Ness and asks her out, and she ghosts him while he worries about her because it's pretty much implied that Ness infiltrated the Fazbear security system and locked employees out of their accounts while also messing with the animatronics and their programming in the Pizzaplex. People theorize a lot over these emails, and there's some really relevant information in them that we'll go over later, but at the same time, I have to put it out there that these emails might not be canon. They were never released in the game, so I don't know if they just never got the time to release them, or if Scott changed his mind on having those emails be a part of the lore. Scott mentioned he knew the emails were going to be leaked, but that doesn't make them canon at all. Illumix actually went on to delete the emails from the files of the game, and worked really hard to keep them hidden, so I don't think that they are canon. So when we discuss those later, take the information into account, but take it with a grain of salt. Now, that is a fuck ton of information I just threw at you, and a lot of it is very interesting. Ness is the same person as Vanessa from Help Wanted. Ness is a nickname for Vanessa because, well, it's right there in the name. And the concerning behavior lines up with what we know about her. researching dark, scary, even violent things, seeming like she's in another world having conversations with who knows what, just like Jeremy. Searching help on its own into Google, the masks she's ordered online, etc. The mention of the IT stuff is interesting. Again, I don't know 100% what Vanessa's job for this company is, but she clearly works for Freddy Fazbear's, having accessed the game files and Help Wanted, and now she's getting these Fazbear office emails and such. If she knows how to work with computers, which is really likely due to the IT conversations and how she was able to put her mask in Help Wanted, then it also establishes part of how she was able to do her plot in the next game. And with that, I think we've got enough context out of the way. I've spent far too long talking about games that aren't Security Breach for a video specifically talking about Security Breach. At the very least, I hope it was an interesting, good recap for y'all. I really wanted to do it because it is so important to understanding Vanessa's character to know all of that. So, with that, I think it's finally time to sit down and play Security Breach.
Cease your talking!
Wah!
You have been talking for 40 minutes, and you haven't even started to discuss the actual topic of the video. What is wrong with you?
Oh no, oh god, not you two again! Catbug, why the hell are you two here?
I sensed that you were talking about another spooky game.
What? Don't tell me, I can't ever do another video on a spooky topic without you freaks showing up.
I warned you last time. We will return. You will indulge us. Unless you want to meet a very painful fate.
No, it's okay, you can stay, just don't cause too much trouble.
On with it!
I heard you were going to talk about Security Breach. I love that game.
I hate that game. A buggy, messy product that fails to encompass the charm of the earlier games in the series.
Well, I hope you'll keep an open mind listening to me talk about it then, because I do genuinely think there's a lot of merit to be had in it, and I think that it is a well-made, competent game with a great environment and story. In Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, we play as a small child named Gregory when he gets trapped, locked inside the Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex Mall overnight. Gregory's main goal is to escape the mall while avoiding getting caught. There's a night guard named Vanessa who's looking for him, hundreds of staff bots and other robots looking for him, as well as a creepy, mysterious woman in a white rabbit costume. Now, I know what you're thinking about the night guard, seeing as her name is Vanessa, but you might also be being tricked about her by assuming the wrong conclusion. Hold on to your thoughts because we will get more into it later. In the mall there are tons of main animatronics, but most of the members of the band are acting hostile towards Gregory, and it's implied that someone, Fanny, has been messing with their programming. The only animatronic who hasn't been completely hacked to be hostile is Glamrock Freddy Fazbear, becomes Gregory's friend and promises to protect him and help him escape the Pizzaplex. Now, this is a really cool premise. Five Nights at Freddy's has always involved child murder, so having a game where we play as a child being hunted by a serial killer, as Glitchtrap has possessed Fanny to become, not only fits super well into the series as a whole, but it also creates a whole lot of tension and intrigue. Also, this was the first ever free roam Fnaf game, and I think it's perfect to pair that with the giant-ass mall filled with secrets surrounding Fazbear Entertainment and its past. William Afton, Vanny, and all of the mysterious new incidents that have been taking place there. If you've seen my Chaotix video, you'll already know how much I love mystery games, and FNAF has always had such mysterious, complex lore. And I love that they continue to have such interesting lore hidden in the games, and that they've given us the opportunity to explore it all. In fact, because this game is so big, it's a little hard to describe plot specifics because there is a ton that happens in-game every hour. And even some points in the game where you have multiple options for which path to take, giving the player some choice and adding to the replayability of it all. At the beginning of the night, the front doors get blocked off, and from there, Gregory is taking Freddy's advice and navigating through different areas in the mall in an attempt to find a way out. Because of the freedom you're given, you're also able to unlock several different endings, 6 to be precise, adding more to the replayability. Now let's talk about the main gameplay. Again, the game is free roam, and Gregory is able to navigate through the mall by walking. While this happens, he must avoid the animatronics and other threats in the restaurant. There are the aforementioned staff bots, which are huge in number, but they can't really see you unless you stand directly in front of them in their spotlight. It makes it like those types of strategy stealth games, where you must sneak past guards or something, building the tension pretty effectively and making you have to look and plan ahead, and also move quickly. Now, if you get caught by one of these guys, it's not immediately game over, as the staff bots will let you go, but they will alert the nearest animatronic to your presence, and you will have to immediately run or hide or something to get away. The actual main threats that you have to sneak around are the Glamrock animatronics, the main members of the Freddy Fazbear Band, Glamrock Chica, Glamrock Montgomery Gator, and Glamrock Roxanne Wolf. We'll go over all of them more individually later, but the animatronics have an AI that makes the game really difficult, tense, and adds so much to the atmosphere and story, and that's a great thing. The animatronics, unlike the staff bots, actually have eyes, at least at first. So Gregory must make an effort to actually keep himself out of sight unless he wants to be chased down by 100 pounds of metal. The animatronics can also hear you if you're being too loud, so you have to be mindful that you're not stomping around making a shit ton of noise. Now, the most interesting part is that as the night progresses, the animatronic AI gets better and better. For example, at the beginning of the night when you're sneaking around Glamrock Chica, she probably won't notice if you slip past her just outside her peripheral vision. However, they're able to better sense and spot you later in the night, so it's harder to avoid her then. Also, one cool mechanic in this game is hiding. Gregory's a small-ass motherfucker like me, so he's able to slip into the tiniest little places to hide. Strollers, these box cart thingies, photo booths, etc. Now, I talked about this in the Tails doll video, but the idea of a hiding mechanic in any game where there's a monster or threat stalking you is really cool. You can use this to guarantee not being seen if an animatronic is around, but there's also a chance that if an animatronic is chasing you and you quickly turn down a corner to hide, they won't know where you've gone. However, again, as the animatronic AI advances over the night, they'll get better and better at finding you. I remember the first time I played this game, I literally bought it release date and played it over a few months with me and my boyfriend, no looking shit up or spoilers at all. And I had known the animatronics were going to get better and better throughout the night, but words cannot describe the fucking horror I felt hiding in a medical booth in Monty's Gator Golf, waiting for the coast to be clear, jumping out and then running to hide in a stroller or something across the way from it, and then checking the cameras and watching Monty walk over to the fucking medical booth and open the curtains, checking the exact spot I had been in only moments prior. I did not know they could check hiding spots until that point.
It's a cool idea to have the machines learn how to do their task better and better the longer it goes. It's cool for the machines to be hunting you at all. I love violent creature robots.
And with the machines hunting you, it's important to go over how Gregory can avoid them besides just hiding in hiding spots. Gregory can also crouch and sneak, which is slower, but it helps you to avoid being seen by the animatronics. Gregory is also able to run, which at first it's very limited. He can outrun some animatronics to an extent, but he doesn't have a lot of stamina. This is balanced out though, as later in the night you can find various power-ups to help Gregory. The hoodie makes him harder to see, the shoes make him faster. There are also Fizzy Faz sodas that help improve Gregory's stamina. I assume by making him hyper as shit on sugar. This series has a lot of funny details like that. You can collect up to 4 of these, one of each different flavor. I like how they made the power-up items realistic in terms of what items would probably help Gregory in real life. Also, I think that it helps for balancing out the night and making it easier to run and escape. Now, I have seen people complain that this makes the beginning of the night that much more unfair and difficult, but I disagree. Near the beginning of the game, the animatronics AIs are a lot easier to deal with. But even if it's a little hard, that's not really a bad thing. Don't gamers like hard levels? It really only seems hard at first because you're still learning the ropes at this point. Something neat is that these earlier areas are basically tutorials for different aspects of the game you'll be dealing with. Chica's area teaches you to sneak and avoid animatronics, use distractions to create a diversion, which is another mechanic I hadn't mentioned up until now. Again, it's cool and good that there are multiple ways to deal with the animatronics. This section with Monty teaches you how to properly use your stamina while running, etc. It's going to be hard if you're a new player, but even so, I think it's good for introducing you to the game's mechanics. Besides, the harder the game gets, the more upgrades and tools Gregory will have at his disposal to deal with those increased threats. Another cool tool you get is the Faz Watch, which helps out in a few different areas. Story-wise, the watch lets you communicate with Freddy, and this is where a lot of your main missions will be written out clearly so you know what you're doing. Always a good thing. There will be a lot of interesting messages you can unlock that it will show up here on your watch, some of which will have very interesting lore tidbits. This is also where you have a map of the pizzeria with areas of importance marked, as well as where the cameras are. I really appreciate them giving us cameras because it's just something that's so classic to Fnaf. Most Fnaf games have had us as the security guards just watching cameras to keep an eye on where the animatronics are, and that's exactly what it does in this game. You can even spot Gregory himself on the cameras, so they're great for figuring out where the animatronics are and also the layout of the area. Especially if you're a first-time player just entering an area, it can be hard to know exactly where you're going, but the cameras can sometimes tell you a lot about the layout of an area. Though, you might also be like me. Maybe this is an autism thing, I don't know, but I'm kind of spatially challenged. When it comes to mapping out locations in my brain, especially in a video game, I have a very hard time processing the information that's on screen. So it took me like multiple playthroughs of this game to actually learn the layout well, but that's just a me problem. You'll probably fare better than I do when you play it. Another useful tool is Freddy himself, and I'm going to talk about what a neat concept this is in a narrative analytical way for a second. I don't think there has ever been a time in FNAF before this point where we've had, like, a friend. In all the original games, all the animatronics want to fucking kill you or harm you, and it's a battle for your fucking life against dozens and dozens of threats. The only exceptions are like, what, some dude on the phone who gave you a tutorial and then died? Baby pretending to be our friend in FNAF 5 only to betray you and scoop out your insides and wear you like a skin suit? Helpy dancing around on screen in FNAF 6? Okay, I won't deny FNAF 6 Helpy was our friend and a fucking cutie pie, but like, he didn't talk to us or anything. He was more like a cute mascot who hung out on screen. Up until this point, if you ignore Helpy, I'm a monster, we really didn't have any friends who would help us out or stick by our side. So it's a really nice and interesting change of pace to do that in a FNAF game for once. And it's not really something that's been explored in this series before.
What purpose does adding a friend serve? This is supposed to be a horror game. It'd be scarier if you were alone.
Maybe, but I think Freddy fills a much needed role. Gregory's guidance. See, in previous games, our guidance was a phone, some sort of voice directing and guiding us through the game. We always had something telling us what to do. And I'd argue that's needed for a game like Security Breach. Sure, it's a big free-roam game inside a gigantic mall, but it still has a narrative and tons of scripted events that we have to go through. If Gregory had no one else to guide him, we would probably either A, wander around aimlessly trying to figure out where to go and what to do, or B, have Gregory unnaturally talk aloud to himself the entire game like, maybe I should check out the loading docks, or some bullshit like that. That would have been a little silly. Not that characters can't talk to themselves sometimes. Hell, Gregory does this a few instances in the actual game, muttering to himself about something Freddy said or something like that. Hell, I'm constantly talking to myself IRL because of autism stimming, so like, I have no room to talk, but if you overuse it in a game, it can feel weird, unnatural, unprompted, you get the idea. Gregory needs something to direct him to what to do next, and Freddy narratively provides a consistent voice of guidance. Not only is it just fucking nice and a great change of pace to have an alliance, but it's interesting to make it the main man himself. Some iterations of Freddy in previous games can seem intimidating, aggressive, etc., but by making him a friend, it adds a lot of distinct, unique personality to the glam rock variation of Freddy specifically. He comes off more as a lovable, concerned, parent-type character who cares very deeply about you and your safety, and it's important to have interesting characters like this in gaming. Also, by making it the main man Freddy, Gregory's friend figure is someone who would be very knowledgeable about everything in the mall, sometimes even giving us some insight as to its secrets. Freddy is also a very useful game tool, and his inclusion in the mechanics he provides make the game more fun than if he weren't there at all. Gregory has the ability to call Freddy to wherever Gregory is and climb inside of his stomach hatch. This allows for Gregory to hide inside of Freddy safely, as the animatronics will not hurt you so long as you are in Freddy. Additionally, as the night goes on, Freddy can get various upgrades to increase the number of ways he's able to help Gregory, such as being able to break through previously blocked off areas or being able to see hidden objects through walls, though Freddy is a very limited tool. See, Freddy's on reduced power when the game starts, as a safety measure because he had malfunctioned on that day's show. Freddy has a set amount of battery and it can be drained easily, so if the battery goes out while Gregory's inside, Freddy will just straight up kill you, so not ideal. I actually think that's a great way to balance it out and prevent us from overusing Freddy, only relying on him when it's necessary. There are also areas that Freddy isn't actually able to go into, so some areas you have to do completely on your own, which is good for making the player feel like you're in a scary, dangerous place by yourself with no help at all. And it's great that the areas Freddy isn't there to help you with can be some of the creepiest fucking areas in the game, but I'll get into the whole environment of the game later. Freddy does get his batteries recharged at the end of each hour, and there are actually several battery upgrades you can find around the mall as well. If you get them all, then you can actually walk around in Freddy for like minutes on end without dying, so it's really useful to do that. The final main mechanic is the held item. Gregory has a few, and once you unlock them all, you can switch between them. The main first tool you get early on is the flashlight, which is pretty essential since the Pizzaplex can be pretty dark at times. And, like the cameras, it's cool that it's there since older Fnaf games have had flashlight mechanics. The battery can run out, but it's almost never really an issue if you stop by every flashlight recharge station you see. Like Gregory's stamina stat or Freddy's battery, the flashlight can be upgraded with flashlight upgrades that you find throughout the mall. And if you get them all, you basically will never have to worry about your flashlight going out. There are two different tools Gregory can get later on in the night, and which one you receive first really depends on which path you get to take. These tools are cool because they allow you to actually temporarily stun and blind the animatronics, which at this point, since the animatronics are more advanced and vigilant, it can be needed sometimes if you get accidentally spotted. These tools are the Phaser Blaster and the camera.
The Phaser Blaster is a cool laser gun. You get to shoot people with it. I want to shoot people.
Yeah, having a little laser gun that goes pew pew is a pretty fun idea. You can use the blaster up to 5 times before it has to recharge its blast, and you really have to aim it specifically at the animatronic faces in order to actually stun them. So, you can have more uses at the expense of actually having to aim. When I first played, I didn't know you could turn on an aiming reticle in the settings, so we were literally just aiming blindly with this thing, and it sucked ass. It was definitely better when you turn on the aiming setting. The other tool is the camera, which can only be used once before it has to spend time recharging, but it has a much wider range than the blaster gun, and it will stun basically all the animatronics on screen when used. Personally, I prefer to use the camera because of its much wider range. Both the gun and the camera emit some glow, but the camera emits so much light that if your flashlight is low, you can just switch to the camera and you'll be able to get around fine. That's all of the main points of gameplay that's good to know, so now I want to go into my favorite part of the game, the environment of the mall. Because the mall is truly a spectacle to behold. Huge, filled with detail, gorgeous, multicolored lighting everywhere. It's wonderful. This game does make use of ray tracing technology if you have the graphics card for that, but I love how even without that, it still looks amazing. I'm just gonna ramble for a while about all the environmental design. I love how much personality is put into each area. The big main areas are huge and impressive, showing off a fantastic image of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza to any and all visitors that come in. There are huge gold statues of the characters throughout the establishment, with the main coolest one of course being the giant Freddy statue smack dab in the middle of the entrance to the mall. I think it does a great job making an impressive impression. There are tons of signs, both posters and attention-grabbing neon light electronic signs littered with advertisements. Everything has that signature Freddy Fazbear brand on it, and the whole mall is presenting you with a detailed and impressive, but shiny and advanced image to you. Now, the mall is anything but hygienic and safe in reality, but it's clear that Fazbear Entertainment is trying to present that squeaky clean image to try and save their reputation, and this will contrast super fucking well with the dark, scary, gross, and grimy areas of the mall. This is weird, but I also think the flooring is really cool. Some areas have that signature shiny-ass linoleum floors, and there are some areas with the signature Freddy Fazbear's checkered patterns that were so iconic in the previous games. And also the carpets! The carpets are amazing! Carpet is incredibly important to capturing that 80s arcade aesthetic, and the carpets in this game seem like a love letter to that era. Not only are the designs reminiscent of those older arcade designs, but they all have great motifs related to the security breach characters. The carpet helps to define the areas and which areas are associated with certain characters and themes. Steelwool specifically did a lot of research with the carpet designs, and I think it shows. I also really like how unified each area is with specific themes. Each character's main rooms and attractions have their personality made explicitly clear purely through the decorations and colors and stuff used, and I think that works fantastically. The carpets, the piles and piles of merchandise, the signs, the color palettes! Ah, it's fantastic! I feel sad I can't talk about every single area in extreme detail, because if I did, we'd probably be here for like 4 hours. I'm aiming for this video to be like, what, an hour and a half? Who knows, honestly, we'll see. We'll see. I do want to talk about some of the main coolest areas on display in the mall. The atrium is the main attraction, being a humongous open area you can see from multiple floors in the mall. There are hundreds of chairs and tables for guests, and all of the food and main attractions are on display here. It's like a big hub for guests with signs and attractions in every which direction telling you, hey, give us your money at this cool attraction! The giant signs for each attraction are great, and then of course you have the giant stage where the animatronics perform, as well as huge holograms being projected of the animatronics, so that anyone on any floor can easily see the show. It is impressive and awesome. I'm personally a huge fan of the daycare area. It does scream, play place for toddlers, and it does a great job of conveying that kiddie fun aesthetic. The adorable and cheerful aesthetic of the sun, clouds, moon, blue skies, etc. Of course, it also fits the daycare attendant perfectly. I adore the rainbow of colors here, both on the play equipment and in the giant, disgusting ball pits. Having kid-toddler areas be bright, attractive rainbow colors not only makes sense for babies' developing minds, but it grabs your attention in such a fun way and makes for such a cool contrast once the lights go out. Bazzer Blast is one of the coolest areas, with dark colors contrasting against the bright neon colors, creating such striking visuals. They do a great job capturing a spacey vibe, as well as the fun feel of laser tag with the bright colors, and the maze of obstacles and hiding spaces that you stealth around. Everything in the lobbies here feels so sleek and shiny and very technological, perfect for the feel of an advanced spaceship or something. The storytelling that's told through the backstory that you're fed entering the attraction is also fun and adds to the entire vibe. There are a shit ton of other areas with cool stuff too, Rockstar Row having remnants of old restaurants like a museum. The West Arcade again making use of those striking neon colors in dark areas, while also being absolutely overcrowded with arcade machines and games and attractions. Monty's Golf area being dark and green with a swamp motif, crocodiles and plants everywhere. Bonnie Bowling's vibes being exactly like an old bowling alley with the cool blue colors on the walls. Interesting designs and long bowling alleys that horrifying endoskeletons crawl out of. I could go on and on, really. It's also kind of strange seeing these huge spaces that are supposed to be bustling and busy, full of people, but it obviously isn't since the mall is closed right now. I think the environment adds to the feeling of, I am somewhere where I am not supposed to be, and it can only help add to the horror element of a game. I know Fnaf security breach haters probably have played the game before, but to anyone who hasn't played this game, I implore you to do so and explore as many corners of the mall as you can. It is truly a visual treat, and I think it's worth it just to see these cool-ass amazing environments. And oh goodness, the music! The music! It's so good and perfectly contributes to the feeling of each area. When it's showtime in the main atrium, the main theme of Freddy Fazbear's band is of course blasting loudly on all the speakers. In Rockstar Row, the music is a little distant, but it is of the band's main theme, making it perfect for feeling like a place where the robots take a break. The daycare attendant music is fun as hell and goofy with silly-ass nonsensical sound effects thrown in, and it perfectly fits the fun, over-the-top vibe that area is supposed to have. Bazzer Blast is a very fun, spacey theme, and when you actually get into the game, the music is very upbeat and fast and gets you into the tense feel of the laser tag game. Which, it is wonderful that they actually programmed in a tense laser tag game you have to play while Chica is roaming around the area. That's awesome as fuck. I actually love the music in El Chip's area, taking a lot of inspiration from Mexican music to fit the feel of the food. I only wish that the area was bigger so I could hear it more. And those are just a few areas in the game. Please go listen to the soundtrack because there are a shit ton more bangers and bops in there. And it's not just the main songs that play in each area either. There are random background songs that are just meant to build ominous atmosphere. some of them sounding almost otherworldly and alienating. I highly recommend skimming through some of these tracks too, because they do a great job of adding to the horror feel. Some of the songs can make you feel really uneasy, adding to the trapped feeling that Gregory has while stuck inside this huge, almost empty of people mall. I also appreciate that the closer you get to an animatronic, the more dramatic and scary the music gets, heightening your awareness to just how much danger you're actually in. It's awesome. Somewhat related, but also somewhat tangential, when Vanny specifically is near, not only does the music get more ominously creepy, but Gregory's vision also starts to become distorted. It feels like everything is louder, and it's a really neat detail because it makes the player extremely aware that there's a serial killer a few feet away from you, and I think it adds to the atmosphere. I'm not sure exactly what is causing Gregory's senses to become overcrowded and distorted when Vanny's near. Perhaps it's due to Glitch Trap residing in her body, or some weird mechanism programmed into the suit she's made, who knows. Anyways, back to the environment specifically. Like I mentioned previously, it is masterful how they contrast these big, bright, impressive areas with the gross, unsanitary, dark, and disgusting sections of the mall that are closed off to the public. There's a shit ton of trash that can be seen just outside of the public's view in the back rooms of some areas, like enter the kitchen and see how fucking gross it is with all the piles of trash, spilled food, and cockroaches all over, etc. One great example is when Gregory finds himself trapped in the mall sewer system with Chica. The whole area is dark and damp, filled with disgusting ass water and garbage and just shit piled up in every which direction. It is truly one of the most gross areas you could ever find yourself in, and it especially builds the tension that it's dark and cramped and a little difficult to navigate when you're trapped down there with Chica, and at times it can be hard to navigate. The area you find after this section, a secret area where Vanny has been in, is great and interesting and creepy as hell when you first find it. Ominously lit by candles, with confusing but disturbing little notes littered literally everywhere. The scary staff bot heads that she's painted over, the disturbing setup at the top of the stairs that seemingly depicts the Afton family, and has led to a lot of theories that flat out annoy me because I don't believe they're true, since there's not really too much evidence to support it, but that's neither here nor there. Underneath the mall, where the dilapidated old Fnaf 6 location lies, is also a great example of a creepy, gross area, with it being immediately recognizable to old fans as, holy shit, we've been here before.
That area is cool. I love that there's a monster hiding and waiting underneath the mall. The area is also swarmed with the creepy, nightmare-owned staff bots patrolling the place, and the ruined remains of all the thrown-away bots, statues, and trash from the Pizzaplex.
However, and this is gonna sound weird, the scariest area to me was the area with the endoskeletons. You're in sort of a dark, narrow tunnel, off limits to the public, only to come across this creepy-looking endoskeleton, completely unmoving. However, once you pass it, you quickly realize it's moving.
The endos are creepy. Freezing their movements the instant the player looks at them. It could make you question at first whether or not it actually moved, but it will become obvious once it's moved significantly.
I think it's a wonderfully creepy concept for a horror game to have an enemy like this. It can only actually get you once you stop looking at it, which makes you a little paranoid to actually turn away from it. But turn away from it you must once you get further into the tunnels of the endoskeleton area, as there are specific buttons you must press while facing the button, back exposed, and dozens of endoskeletons start appearing. It only starts out as one or two, but the further you go, the more that appear. It makes for a pretty difficult section, as you have to juggle figuring out where you have to go, keeping track of the endoskeletons, and staring at them to stall them when you can. This is easier said than done. The endoskeleton area has a ton of doors and narrow skinny halls, and again, maybe this is just my autism making me really bad at comprehending areas spatially, but this area is when I got turned around in and lost the most. It's like a confusing little maze. Not only does it have these creepy endoskeletons everywhere, but also these creepy murals with art that has rabbit imagery painted all over it, clearly relevant to the series lore. It also has a lot of daycare stuff everywhere for some reason. Plushes and imagery related to the daycare tenant and daycare blocks. I don't know why it feels creepy to me, but it does. Maybe it's just because it's weird seeing such child-friendly imagery in the very not child-friendly parts and service corridors where endos and robot parts and wires and shit are everywhere. The creepiest fucking part is if you enter this room off to the side, it's very dark with an inactive endo standing directly in front of a present. Fuck no, fuck that. Oh my god. If you decide to grab that present, the endo comes to life, so that's fucking horrific. See, I love how this game will have tons of creepy little environments like that, with tons of great, but also scary-ass personality in it. Okay, let's finally touch on the characters. One complaint I often see about Fnaf from people who don't know jack shit about Fnaf is that, all the Fnaf characters are just recolors, reused from the original 4 characters. Which, has never been true. Even if there are a bunch of Freddys, a bunch of Chicas, etc., each Fnaf character's designs are super unique. Whether the differences between the originals be as exaggerated as Funtime Freddy's moving face and body plates in pink and white colors and puppet accessories, or even if they're very similar. Some people think FNAF 1 Freddy is very, very close to FNAF 2 Freddy, but if you actually look closely at FNAF 2 Freddy, he has a distinctly different face shape from the original Freddy. My point is, FNAF has always had super unique characters, and the robot's whole vibes are often reflective of the specific game's restaurant's aesthetics as a whole.
Five Nights at Freddy's has too many characters. They only exist to make merchandise for children.
Oh, I'm gonna have to hard disagree with you there, buddy. There's a term that's become really popular online recently, and this is just a personal problem, but I honestly fucking hate it. It's mascot horror. People use it to describe FNAF and a ton of different games that were trying to mimic FNAF's success by creating main characters in their horror project to serve as mascots for it, often just using them to sell merch to kids. Just like you said, Bugged. Now, I do agree that a lot of indie horror has a problem with just shitting out lazy, unimaginative shit just made exclusively to appeal to babies. Think Huggy Wuggy, or that band crap, whatever the fuck it's called. However, there are a few reasons why I think the label of mascot horror is unhelpful, and also why I don't think FNAF falls into this kid-pandering category. Recognizable main characters have always been a thing in media, and that includes horror. There have always been horror icons. Think Freddy, Krueger Not Fazbear, Jigsaw, Chucky, etc. Point is, it's always been a thing, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I recognize that mascot horror isn't even supposed to be a negative term at all. It's just kind of been turned into a negative thing because whenever internet gaming nerds bring up mascot horror, they usually do it just to discuss how a lot of the games they deem in that category are just trying to appeal to babies. Which, again, that is a problem, but I don't think the fact that a given game has recognizable characters is the sole reason why. I feel like a lot of these games can be really different from each other, and it's just flat out unhelpful to shove them all under the same umbrella. Especially since FNAF is not just some shit appealing to babies. Now, people will disagree with me on this, and I admit FNAF does market itself to teens, but that's the thing. FNAF is made for teens and up, and that's it. It's not made for kids. People think that just because a game doesn't have gore in it, it's suddenly super child-friendly, even though the series deals with dark topics like child murder, the books and the movie have gore, there are legitimately terrifying moments, etc. I'm not a parent, never will be, and it's not like I would ban my child from playing FNAF. I recognize that there are a lot of little kids that do love it, but it's simply not made for them. It's targeted towards older kids and older teens and adults.
Have you seen the merchandise? It is all marketed towards babies.
I will concede with you there that a lot of the merch is targeted at little kids, but that's more of an issue with the merch specifically than with the games. Again, Scott was like just some guy before his game blew up beyond massive proportions. He's let a lot of companies make a lot of merch, some less high quality than others, and I think his expertise is more so on making games than it is on quality control with merch. To me, it seems more of an issue with companies like Funko having free reign to make a ton of FNAF shit going, hey, kids like this game, let's market to them specifically because that'll give us the most money. Funko is kind of a lazy-ass company sometimes, and since a lot of their shitty-ass plushies and action figures are straight-up recolors, I think it doesn't help FNAF's image at all, and I think it tricked people into thinking this is a lazy series for babies, but please recognize that that is an issue with Funko and other merch companies and the quality control for FNAF merch in general. Funko is a whole ass rant. I won't get into it today because I have a lot of words to say about that company. Anyways, Five Nights at Freddy's is more like the first Shrek movie. It was really, really fucking good and did something that seemed new at the time, but then every single other game and movie that came out tried to copy its formula, but it did it worse and just fucking destroyed its reputation because people thought that it was doing the bad tropes that it created.
Cease your rambling again. You did not need to go on a 5-minute tangent.
Shit, fuck, right, sorry, where was I? Right, the characters! It's not a bad thing that Fnaf has many characters. In fact, without good characters to connect to, there's kinda not really much of a reason to care. Like, I'm gonna paraphrase something the director of the Fnaf movie was talking about in an interview because I think it's relevant here. You can have an interesting environment or story, but when you have characters that you actually care about in the story, it gives the audience reason to be invested and want to follow the story. FNAF Security Breach would be cool on its own with its giant mall environment, but by giving us an interesting player character and also super interesting things going on with the villain and all the other characters, it gives the audience a reason to care. The characters in FNAF Security Breach are really fucking good, and each one has a distinct and memorable personality that both contributes to the themes of the game, but also makes an impression on the audience. We'll start with our main kid, Gregory, who ended up being my favorite character in the entire FNAF franchise. No, I'm not joking, I like him better than all the animatronics. When people first heard the premise for this game and saw the trailers, we all kind of thought the same thing. Oh no, this poor baby boy, a poor sweet innocent baby cinnamon roll baby kid is trapped inside the mall with a serial killer. Poor kid must be so scared, oh no! Gregory is one of the greatest fucking menaces in all of media. This little gremlin is one of the funniest fucking brats that there is. Okay, I'm exaggerating a bit, but I do mean it when I say Gregory has an attitude, and it does wonders for adding humor and more excitement into the game itself. This kid's literal first line is rudely telling Freddy to shut up! He swears multiple times.
Oh crap! Freddy, I found the free gift! It's a crappy Mr. Hippo fridge magnet? Lame.
Has a penchant for destroying property as he fucking commits acts of violence against the other animatronics and literally tears them apart, ripping their body parts out to use them as upgrades in intense but really cool fight sequences. He has the option to shoot Freddy in the face.
Why though?
And in one of the non-canon endings, bro steals a car and zooms off the fucking highway, crashing into robots and sides and only stopping to play with the electrical cable so he could give Freddy more power. All this is to say that Gregory has the option to create a lot of mischief in the mall, and this is great for adding more interest into the story. It shows off the sarcastic thoughts the player themselves might be thinking, and it contrasts that against the Pizzaplex Freddy Fazbear's overly family-friendly image. But it's also worth mentioning that I think it's balanced out well. Sure, Gregory is a gremlin, but also he's not so big of a rude kid that it ruins your view of him. If he was too bratty, I could see the audience not liking him or not wanting to root for him, but he's just a normal kid with a kind of mischievous attitude. His worries, fears, wants, and goals all seem realistic for a somewhat tough kid placed into this situation. He actually does show a lot of caring, and he gets genuinely concerned for his friend Freddy, but also, in the canon path of the game, he pursues the mysteries of the mall, even if it means putting his own life at risk, because he wants to figure out what's going on and put a stop to it.
Freddy, if I leave now, nothing will change, will it? There will be more disappearances.
Yes, I am afraid that is correct.
He's surprisingly selfless, endangering himself because he doesn't want any more innocent kids to go missing and die. He's also just funny, especially in a lot of his conversations with Freddy, since he contrasts a little with Freddy's wholesome energy.
How are your new eyes?
I am having a hard time adjusting. You look different to me. I can see movement through the walls.
Really? I didn't know Roxy could see through walls.
These are Roxy's eyes?
Freddy himself is a great contrast to Gregory. He's very wholesome and caring, like he's Gregory's fucking dad or something. Freddy is the very pure-hearted goody two-shoes who just wants to help you out, but is also a great guide for introducing you to the world building in the mall.
Shame on you, Gregory. We cannot enter together. That would be cheating. I am programmed not to cheat.
Overall, a wonderful character who is lovable, but also very useful in the story as a great contrast to Gregory. It's really telling how good the characters in this series are when each of the Glamrocks is so distinct in their personality and all have super unique designs, themes, and traits. All of this is conveyed through their design and the simple way that they talk. Within the first 5 minutes of the game, when Gregory's crawling through the vents, getting sneak peeks at their room, and only seeing small glimpses of them, we basically already learn everything the player needs to know about who these characters are. Roxy is talking to herself about how great she is, illustrating how much she cares about herself and how much she values her own ego. Monty, we only get to hear yelling and violence, which tells the player about his aggressive nature. Chica's pink room is littered with food and pizza boxes and posters about fitness. The characters' actions and the environments that are modeled based off of them do so much storytelling, and it's great. Of course, you'll learn more about each of the Glamrocks as the game progresses, and you get to hear their voices, watching their movements, and interact with them in general, but this opening scene is a great example of how much you can learn about a character from just a small glance. Now is as good as any point as ever to talk about the voice actors, who all do such a great job conveying their characters and bringing that personality to life. I feel like people overlook how much vocal performance contributes to how a character is perceived. And maybe I'm a bit biased because I am currently trying to pursue voice acting as a career, but the way an actor acts through their voice to convey emotion and personality is really important. And each character has a voice that does this really well. Kellen Goff is literally one of my most favorite voice actors in the world, and he does a great job of conveying Freddy's friendly, caring, yet deep and Freddy-like voice.
Way to go, superstar! I knew you could do it. I know how to get you out of here. Climb back into my chest cavity.
He also voices the daycare attendant, my favorite animatronic in the series. The daycare attendant is all about contrast, the sun and the moon being different forms it takes on. The character design and personalities contrast starkly from each other, with the sun being energetic and bright. Kellen's voice performance does a great job of conveying a manic sort of energy. The sun is a ball of energy, but it also kind of sounds like it's stressed out of his mind. Maybe it's from having to look over so many kids, maybe it's because he's having conflict with the moon. It's an interesting part of the character, which is pretty much conveyed purely through the voice performance.
Don't you want a puppet show? I have glitter glue. You like glitter glue? Googly eyes?
In contrast, Kellen plays the moon as dark and scary and frankly pants-shittingly horrifying. I don't know how the hell Kellen Goff does the standard deep, growly, scary voice without it coming across as cheesy or silly, because it is genuinely awesome and creepy.
Naughty boy. Naughty boy. It's past your bedtime. You must be punished. Nighty-night.
Every other voice actor does a great job with bringing personality to their characters as well. I enjoy how much attitude Marta Switek gives to Gregory while still making him sound like a believable child. She also voices Roxy, and her voice is deeper and kinda gives you the vibe of a cool, put-together character. Everything Roxy wants you to think that she is.
Everyone loves you. Everyone wants to be you. You are the best. Thank you. I am the best. I am the best.
When Roxy gets destroyed, though, the crying and kind of pathetic and sad-sounding qualities to her voice give you another perspective on her character and the issues she has. She also voices Vanny, and it's a wonderfully eerie, high, almost sweet voice. It's creepy, but also trying to sound friendly in an attempt to lure Gregory away. Unsuccessfully.
Gregory, I may have lost my temper earlier, but it was just a glitch. It won't happen again.
Heather Masters does a great performance of Chica and also Vanessa. I love how annoyed she makes her sound. It's genuinely hilarious.
Ugh. I hate kids.
Finally, Cameron Miller does great as Monty. Not just aggressive yelling, but also conveying his cool gator attitude. He's tough and confident and has a nice accent.
Rock and roll!
I wanted to spend a little bit of the video talking about misconceptions people have about Security Breach and its story elements. And since I was just talking a lot about the characters, it's probably time I address the elephant in the room and talk about Vanessa and Vanny. See, when you start the game, it immediately tries to make you believe that Vanny and Vanessa are the same person. A huge chunk of the fandom believes this, and I don't blame them. We know that the character player in Help Wanted is probably named Vanessa because, come on, her nicknames are Vanny and Ness. What other name fits that description? There's even a point in the game where Gregory and Freddy speculate out loud about Vanny's identity and guess that she's related to Vanessa.
Vanny. It is very similar to Vanessa, and also Bunny. That cannot be a coincidence.
However, despite what you might think at first, Vanny and Vanessa are not the same person. They're both girls named Vanessa, and they do look the same at first glance, but they are not the same person. And that's not just a theory, it's basically the only real possibility, since there's a lot more evidence leaning towards that than there is of the theory that they're the same person. The game literally tells us outright that they're not the same person, which is why I'm so confused about how much of the fandom believes otherwise. Again, I feel like a lot of Fnaf fan kiddies get brain rot watching shit like Game Theory or other YouTubers who spout the most ridiculous nonsense about Vanessa and Vanny, and it makes me so mad.
You're being condescending.
Yeah, sorry, you're right, that was a little mean. I just get so heated about this point because I've had people confidently tell me, you're wrong, they're the same person. As if I haven't played this game at least a dozen times and know it like the back of my hand, and I have like definitive proof as to why their arguments are silly. But let's just have good faith and explain why Vanessa and Vanny are separate characters. The game trying to convince you that Vanny and Vanessa are the same person is a red herring. Which, if you don't know, a red herring is a logical fallacy. In simple terms, it's some sort of information, maybe a clue left behind by the author, made to make you think one thing, but it is intentionally misleading. Fnaf Security Breach wants you to think Vanny is Vanessa because they want to misdirect and distract you. Fnaf is a series where you have to dig a little bit more to find the truth. Now, here's an actual list of reasons why they're different people. Number 1, the fire escape ending. In the fire escape ending, Vanny ends up grabbing Gregory only for Freddy to begin fighting her. Freddy and Vanny both end up falling off the building and basically dying. Gregory runs down and cries over Freddy for a moment before tentatively walking over to Vanny and removing the mask, revealing Vanessa underneath. However, after the credits roll, the camera pans up and reveals Vanessa the Night Guard watching from above. Now, I've been told the silliest, most illogical thing in response to me bringing up this cutscene as proof. Hey Sparkell, that's an alternate ending. It's not the canon ending, so it's not real, and therefore none of the stuff in it matters. To which I say, you have no fucking clue how alternate endings work. An alternate ending is an ending that would have happened had alternate events taken place. However, alternate endings cannot just make up whatever bullshit they want to change the course of the story. That's not how it works. They can't change the events of the main story that's already happened. Alternate endings cannot just invent new characters out of thin fucking air. Therefore, if there are 2 people named Vanessa in this ending, that means there are 2 different people in the actual game. They can't just magic a new character in. Also worth noting that oftentimes in games and stuff, alternate endings are literally used to reveal information to the audience that would not have otherwise been known. Number 2, it just makes more sense for there to be 2 different people considering the events that happen in-game. In the game, there are points where we see Vanny directly after seeing Vanessa in an instant. For example, once Vanessa captures Gregory, she puts him in the Lost and Found and begins talking to him. She literally gets cut off by Vanny.
This is not the night to be wasting my time. So, you are going to wait right there in Lost and Found until your parents or the police arrive.
Are you having fun yet?
It is literally impossible for Vanessa to have changed out of her night guard uniform into the bunny rabbit costume in like 1 millisecond. I'm sorry. She's not a magical girl. Now, you could argue, Sparkell, that's a video. It could have been pre-recorded. But I don't understand when or why she would have pre-recorded that message rather than just waiting for him to wake up and talk to him. Also, let's just think about this for a second. Vanny wants to kill Gregory. So like, if she was Vanessa, why didn't Vanessa just immediately kill Gregory? She grabbed him and then locked him in the Lost and Found. For what reason if she could have just killed him right then and there? Also, what point does Vanny have in changing out of her rabbit costume into a night guard uniform, then back into the bunny costume multiple times in the night? That sounds like a shit ton of work and literally has no point. It is much simpler to apply Occam's razor and assume that there's 2 different people. Reason number 3? They literally have different voice actors. Like I mentioned before, Vanny is voiced by Marta Svetek, and Vanessa is voiced by Heather Masters. There's no reason for them to have different voice actors if they are the same person. That only makes sense in video game series if it's 2 different games and they couldn't get the same actor, or if something happened to the actor, or maybe if the character aged or something, but you're telling me the same person has 2 different voices in the same game for no reason? And also, it is impossible to sound exactly like a separate voice. As good of an impression you can make of someone else, everyone's vocal cords create a unique voice with distinct qualities that can only be found in their voice alone. So not only is there no reason for this quote-unquote same person to have 2 different voices, it is literally nonsensical. Now, I completely understand that it might be hard to wrap your head around these 2 being different characters. I mean, it is pretty weird that these 2 people have the same name and almost the same appearance, but it is worth mentioning that Vanny dyeing her hair is canon. Again, in AR, the emails discussed dyeing her hair rainbow colors, so we haven't really seen what Ness looked like before AR. The only visuals we have of her are in Security Breach. Feel free to discard it and insult me and my opinions and call me slurs in the comment section, but Vanny came to the pizzeria to commit crimes, and she even got in trouble for being caught on the security tapes.
They report that they've caught you on camera, or at least it appears to be you. Nothing to say about that? Well, the techs are convinced that you've hacked into their system many times.
But I think she discovered, hey, one of the employees here has the same name as me. It would have been the perfect opportunity for her. If she could change her appearance to look more like this Vanessa, then she could not only pass the blame for her crimes onto her, but gain easier access into the mall, since she looks just like an employee that works there. People like to use the cut AR emails to claim that Vanny is the security guard. There's a cut email listing the employee's birthday information. Vanessa the security guard's birthday is September 23, and she gets a rabbit-shaped cake. But again, not only is the canonness of this email dubious because it was never released, but it also takes place after Vanny has hacked the system and messed with all the employee information on it. Maybe in order to pass the blame onto the other Vanessa, she associates her with rabbit iconography. I mean, rabbit-shaped is really odd in the context of the email anyways, because it's not a cake flavor. So the whole thing is really weird and purposeful. But that's just a theory. A game theory! There's a lot of cut content from the game in the files that people use to theorize about Vanny and Vanessa being the same. Vanessa has voice lines sounding scared that she hasn't caught Gregory yet, and I get that there's a lot of evidence pointing to her being Vanny. Who knows, maybe I'm wrong about everything. I'm honestly willing to completely change my mind if I was presented with compelling enough evidence, but again, I think cut content from the game is not canon. There's a lot of conflicting information, so you want to know my honest, real thoughts and theories? I think at one point in development, they were intended to be the same character, but they changed their minds about the lore before the game released. Because a lot of cut content seems to imply that they're the same person, but then a lot of the content in the game itself seems to imply the opposite. Maybe it's possible Vanny and Vanessa are connected while being different people, as in maybe one of them is manipulating the other. I have no idea. And I know a lot of people complain about Vanny and Vanessa's characters and all of the cut content. They'll say, there was so much cut content, they could have been great. Their characters in the game are messy and conflicting and confusing. And I'll talk more about the whole cut content stuff later in the video, but I don't think it's a problem for this specific mystery to be presented in a confusing way, or to have seemingly conflicting information. For me at least, part of the appeal of Fnaf has always been trying to piece together the mystery, and I actually like it when they make it challenging and confusing. Adding red herrings and stuff is a great way to add interest for analysts. They've made it more complicated and interesting, and it just makes you ponder it over more in your head than if it was just spelled out explicitly in a clear way. Challenge is a good thing, even in mystery solving. Also, I want to briefly state, because I brought up the specific Fnaf AR email, people think that Vanessa is an Afton because her last initial is written as A, but it's literally not possible for that to be the case. Security Breach takes place in or after the year 2035, as there's a photo in the Pizzaplex signed with that date. Assuming that it does take place in 2035 at the earliest, though it could take place later, if Vanessa's in her mid-20s, then she would have been born in the 2010s. Maybe the 2000s if you think she's over the age of 30, but William Afton is dead by that point. And Michael has been turned into an Orpal guy, Ennard skin suit, sad purple man, and I doubt he would have been able to find anyone to have a kid with. All the other Aftons are dead. Well, assumed dead. We don't really know much about Afton's wife. Shut up, game theory fans. And I don't think we should go crazy assuming stuff about her either. Like, is it really all that likely that she was still alive and had a kid in the 2010s? No, not really. And I don't think there's any other Afton family members Vanessa could be related to, because all of William's other kids died. Now, I do think it's possible that symbolically, Vanessa is carrying out William Afton's legacy by murdering kids, so maybe she could be considered an Afton in spirit. But I also just think it could just be a red herring. It's also about the security guard Vanessa, not Vanny, and it's probably not canon, because it was in the cut AR emails, which never came out, and they were trying to hide them from us, so they're not true. So, yeah. Sorry, I'm on a huge tangent here, but I really just think everything to do with the guard is a red herring. Anyways, you can say what you want and have your own opinions about these characters, but I think both the Vanessas are really interesting. Night Guard Vanessa is mostly just a red herring, but a fun character nonetheless, driving up the tension by it being another threat Gregory must avoid during the night. And Vanny is a pretty creepy and complicated villain. Now here's something that I've seen people be confused about because of Ruin, which Ruin will have its own segment later on in the video, but which ending is the canon ending to Security Breach? And my honest answer is, I don't know. I used to be super sure of myself about it, but as I've delved more and more into this game, I've come across so much information that's confusing, or makes me contemplate the whole timeline over again. However, there's two endings that are most likely to be canon. They cannot both be canon at the same time, as there would be some contradictory events in them, but for either one, I could see them being canon. You just have to analyze really hard all the clues, decide for yourself, and theorize about all the extra events that may have happened after Security Breach. I know, it sounds confusing, so let's look at both of them one step at a time. Now, there are a lot of great Security Breach endings. The funniest one, of course, is the one where Gregory hijacks a car, but I also really love the Vanny endings, especially the one where he sets Vanny free from the Glitch Trap curse by unlocking the secrets of the Princess Quest games. There isn't a lot of dialogue, but you can tell a lot about the emotions of the characters from their faces and the body language. The shot of them eating ice cream on the hill at the end is beautiful. This is one of the potentially canon endings, and honestly, it's my favorite ending out of all of them. The other potentially canon ending, and it's the one I used to believe 100% most definitely was the canon ending, but I don't really hold that position anymore, is the Burn Trap ending. Gregory makes his way underneath the mall to find Mike's old restaurant and William Afton's disgusting corpse inside. This ending is really cool, the reveal of Afton is really awesome and dramatic, and it feels straight out of a horror movie or something. I also love the blob creature with the remnants of old animatronics and souls. Its creepy tentacle-like wires are great for sending an unnerving feeling up the player's spine. Now, what tells us the canonicity of these endings? One clue that points to these two endings potentially being real is the comic book endings. In Security Breach, both the Burn Trap ending and the Vanny endings are the only endings that have 3D animated cutscenes, implying that they are more real than the endings that are just in the style of drawn comic books. Later in Ruin, it's revealed that all the comic book endings were drawn by Gregory, or at least we're told that it's Gregory who drew them. And in that, he's drawn all of the endings except for the Vanny Good ending, which may point to that ending being canon. It's also worth noting that these two endings are some of the most difficult ones to get, and in Fnaf you usually have to work your butt off to unlock the hardest ending. Again, this is a series where you have to work to uncover the truth. There is a lot of other evidence in the Ruin DLC that points to the Vanny ending being canon. One example is that the Glamrock Freddy we encounter has the exact same injuries that Freddy receives in both the Vanny endings. Though, I'll be honest, when I first played Ruin, I immediately thought, oh my god, that's not our Freddy! Because this Freddy clearly has prototype written on his foot, and our Freddy clearly doesn't when you're repairing him in parts of the service. So I thought the word prototype was a clear indication that this was not our Freddy, but a different one. However, most people disagree and say, what is the likelihood of two Freddys getting extremely similar injuries? And he's found in Phaser Blast. It was just a retcon, and they just added that into his design. Which is fair. My brain still wants to logic it out and is considering the possibility that maybe someone put that on his foot after the events of SB, but it might be a bit far-fetched. It might just be a simple design change. We've had simple design changes in FNAF before. It's not a big deal, and it also doesn't mean that Scott's an idiot who doesn't know his own series or whatever the fuck you want to say. Vanny is also nowhere to be seen in Ruin, which is odd, but there are some things that indicate she might have been freed. When you find Vanny's room in the AR world, the Princess Quest arcade machine has a sword through it. Princess Quest also has a lit candle on it, indicating someone was there recently. There's also the fact that Gregory, I'm putting air quotes around Gregory because I have doubts about him. I'm gonna get into it more later when we get to Ruin. But Gregory has a friend who knows the layout of the mall and directs Cassie at the end. And I wonder if this could be Vanny, seeing as she knows the mall's layout. However, there is still the slight possibility that the Burn Trap ending could be canon. When Cassie visits under the mall, he's noticeably missing. And there's also a long, creepy tunnel that she crawls through created by the Blob, and the Blob was implied to have tunneled out in the Burn Trap ending. If the Burn Trap ending is canon, though, what of Vanny? On the other hand, if the Vanny ending is canon, then something must have happened to Burn Trap and the Blob since then, which is actually kind of likely because of the indications that people have been down there since. The concrete walls sealing in the Mimic, the MXES security system machine that someone's built here, the drawing that's inside of the restaurant that Gregory never went into in the course of SB if the Vanny ending is true, etc. Who, when, how, and what did someone do down here, I do not know, but something clearly has happened since SB, so it's not some illogical plot hole that Burn Trap is missing. Anyways, you should examine the evidence and come to your own conclusions. Personally, I believe that the Vanny ending has more evidence for it being real, but there are a lot of theories, so I want to be open-minded about it. And again, at this point, I haven't played Help 1 and 2 yet, no spoilers, I haven't been able to afford it yet, and I'm not sure if Vanny comes back in that one. I've seen some kind of spoilery thumbnails, but I'm not sure if any more lore gets introduced in that game that impacts which ending is real in this game, so who knows? I would love to hear y'all's thoughts below because it really is something that's just so interesting to me. I've seen people complain that FNAF is too complicated now. It's making the story bad and just filled with theory bait, like it's fucking Hello Neighbor or some shit, but honestly, and maybe this is a little mean of me to say, but that feels like a boomer take to me. I've grown up with FNAF, played it ever since it first came out, and part of the main appeal of it for me has always been the story and mystery hidden within. The story has always had complications, always had hidden secrets, and even questions that were never answered. And sure, it gets more and more complicated as the games progress, but where this differs from other shittier games in my opinion, is that FNAF's story feels like it has an actual purpose and themes. The whole story has always been surrounding William Afton and his evil deeds, and Vanny and all the shit that's happening in the Pizzaplex is just an extension of that. I really do not think that the story is too complicated or impossible to solve, and I do truly believe that Scott does know what he's doing and he has an actual set-in-stone grounded story in mind. Just because the answer isn't cleanly presented to us on a silver platter in an easy-to-digest manner doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or that the story is bad or not written well or whatever. It kinda seems like a very, very uncreative take when people go, "This doesn't make sense, so it's bad writing or a retcon." Don't you want to overanalyze something and work to solve the answer? Is it truly too hard for you to think of any reasonable explanations? Cause I don't really think it is. I personally love the challenge and the clues hidden all over this seem perplexing at first, but it makes you think and ponder the story, almost forcing it to be stuck in your head like an obsession until you solve it. I love that you can find pieces of the mystery all over, in different games and also in the books, which I know people fucking hate the books, but I think they're charming and can be fun, fuck you. I love that this series is fun to analyze and theorize about. Truly, that's one of the greatest parts of it. And just because you personally dislike the story or some aspect of it, which is totally fine and valid, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's poorly written or that the quality of it is bad. I get people will disagree with me on this point entirely and wish for a simpler or more clear story, and your opinions are great, and that's honestly totally understandable if you think that, but I'm just built different. So, at this point, I focus mostly just on the positives of this game because there are a lot of great things about it, and I like rambling about cool things. There are a lot of reasons why people fucking hate this game though, and honestly, I feel like 90% of the time it's a really silly reason why. So let's go over some of the perceived downsides to this game and analyze whether or not they're really that bad. So Bugged. I assume you know most of the criticisms against this game since you dislike it, so come at me with them.
This game is one of the buggiest messes there is.
Ah, yes, the bugs. Okay, so when Security Breach first came out, it was kind of filled with a lot of bugs, and people really like to meme about the number of bugs and glitches in it. But if I'm being completely honest with y'all, a lot of people are very over-exaggerative about the bugs in this game. Sure, there were quite a few, but a majority of them were like purely visual glitches or smaller, sillier bugs that didn't really impact the gameplay. And honestly, maybe I'm being a little mean, but so many gamers are huge fucking crybabies about these bugs when really, I don't think you should be getting mad at visual bugs. They're basically harmless, and I think you just have a massive stick up your ass if you're seriously complaining about it like it's the end of the fucking world. Also, I just find a lot of the bugs personally really funny. I don't get why you're getting mad at it when you could just laugh and move on. It's not a big deal. Now, I do think it's fair to complain about game-breaking bugs, as they can inhibit your ability to actually get through the game. And yeah, Security Breach does have a few bugs that could inhibit your gameplay, but honestly, they aren't all that common. I fucking bought this game the day it came out, and I've played it multiple times, and I can only really name a few times when the bugs have inhibited my gameplay. And even then, it was sometimes fixable by just restarting the PlayStation. Also, it's worth mentioning that Security Breach has gone through many patches and updates, so if you're playing the most recent versions, there are barely any bugs anymore. Like, you're probably only going to encounter bugs if you're actively trying to break the game. And at that point, I don't think it's fair to complain about the bugs since you're actively trying to go out of bounds. It's impossible to have a completely bug-free game, and I'm sure there are games that gamers put on way higher pedestals that are way buggier. Take Pokemon Red and Blue, for example.
Oops. My batteries died.
Security Breach is not scary. Therefore, it is bad horror.
I just have to hard disagree with you right there. I was talking a bit about the scary elements before, but I genuinely think Security Breach has terrifying moments. The lights going out in the daycare, the endos, the sewers, being forced to crawl through small, dark, claustrophobic vents and being chased by tiny, fast spider monsters in them, avoiding the animatronics and other threats stalking you. There are a lot of tense moments that can really freak you out if you're a first-time player. Just because the game isn't dark and scary 24/7 doesn't mean it's not scary or not a horror game. Like I've mentioned before, I prefer Security Breach giving the player moments of rest from the horror, as it makes your brain relax and therefore you won't be suspecting the scares as much and it makes them much more impactful. Plus, something doesn't have to be dark and cramped and covered in blood or whatever to be scary. It can be scary just walking through this big, empty, ominous mall at night. It can be unsettling walking through a room where you know it's usually filled with people, but it's eerily empty. Especially in Gregory's situation, because at the back of your mind, you might be wondering if the next animatronic threat is stalking you through this seemingly empty place. You don't have to be scared by Security Breach's horror, but to say that it isn't good as a horror game is going a little far in my opinion. It's in the horror category for a reason, and just because you're used to the scares in it doesn't mean the scares aren't there.
The game was too rushed, and it could have been better.
You are actually correct. Security Breach was rushed. We knew about Security Breach for a long time, years before it came out. Its release date kept getting pushed, and I think it came out when it did because the rabid Fnaf fans got so impatient about it. If it had more time, it could have been expanded upon more. But I also think that what we got isn't really lacking at all. We got a shit ton of content, hours and hours of gameplay. It works great as a game, even if there was potential for something more. In an ideal world, Steelwool would have been given all the time they needed to impress the haters of the world, and yes, I would have preferred it had they had all the time they needed to have a bigger, more gigantic, and complete game. But I think for the time that they had, the game is amazing. It's big and huge, with tons of story and lore and action. For a relatively small game team, their work is impressive. You can always dwell on what could have been, but I find it less depressing to focus on what you have.
Vanny is a bad villain. She could have done more.
Oh boy. Yeah, people tend to complain a lot about Security Breach's story in general, but they really fucking hate Vanny for some reason. I'm not sure if everyone completely understands her complicated backstory in Help Wanted or the other games or her difference with Vanessa, but regardless, Vanny is a great villain in Security Breach, and here's why. People like to complain that, hey, Vanny didn't have as big a role in Security Breach as expected. She only showed up a handful of times, and as such wasn't as big of a threat to the player than she could have been. So, therefore she's a shit villain, I guess? Let's put aside the fact that literally all the danger in Security Breach is caused by Vanny hacking the machines in the mall. I think that's an argument that would only work if what was in the game and its story was bad and lacking, when it simply isn't. People will always yearn for more, but it's not like the moments Vanny has as a villain in Security Breach are bad. In fact, I think it builds a lot of tension when she does show up, like in Lost and Found, for example. It's really creepy to watch her come closer and closer, even waving in the window while you're panicking and trying to escape. Honestly, although it would have been cool if Annie had more scenes in the games because I love her, it's kind of nice that she's used sparingly. She could have easily been overused, and if she appeared too much, I think it would have made it so the player got used to her too easy, and she would have therefore lost all the scariness she could have had. Instead, since she appears so little, and when Vanny does show up, it's kind of an oh shit, she's here moment. This is heightened with the disorienting effects she causes Gregory to suffer when she's close, which is again really cool and effective at making you feel distressed and panicked. There's a lot of clues even that she's around even when we don't see her explicitly, such as graffiti on the walls, or finding rooms that she's been in. Plus, the other events that are happening when Vanny isn't on screen are just as compelling and exciting. The game is still fun, even without Vanny popping up every 10 seconds. Besides that, Vanny's story is just compelling in general. Not only because of the things in the previous games, but her narrative is extended upon here with the therapy tapes and the Princess Quest games. We sort of know who she is, but there's also a veil of mystery over her. Gregory has the ability to save her, but will he be able to? She's sort of a tragic villain who you might feel bad for because she's acting against her will. What is the full extent of her character? We have to dig up what little clues we have, and frankly, I think that's fun and makes for such an interesting villain. Also, I want to clear up a misconception really quick. Throughout Security Breach, you can find these CDs with recordings of therapy sessions on them. They are hidden throughout the restaurant, visible only with the eyes Gregory steals from Roxy. These eyes can also help reveal a secret room, which strangely resembles Michael's room from Sister Location and has the lore-relevant Freddy and Friends cartoon playing on the TV. It's kind of unsettling and strange, but I like it a lot. Anyways, in this room you can listen to recordings between Vanny and several therapists, who are implied to be killed one by one. We know it's Vanny because not only does it sound like her voice actor, specifically Vanny's voice actor, not Vanessa's. At least to me it sounds more like Marta, I could be wrong, but the events described in them line up with her. She gets in trouble for breaking into the mall and hacking into its systems. The therapist is concerned that she's seemingly talking to no one. She's ordered a ton of fur, etc. Now, there's a misconception that there are actually two people being interviewed in these tapes. People think this because there are clear personality differences in Vanny during these tapes. For example, giving different answers to the same questions on different days, and some days being completely nonverbal and not speaking a word. Some people think that maybe it's the different Vanessas, but I've heard others say that it's Gregory, since the therapists sort of talk in that tone that you use when you talk with small children, and it's unclear what happened to his parents, and these therapy tapes discuss that.
Alright, well, I'd like to start by talking about your parents. What happened to them, and you? It was tragic, but when I looked through the notes, I didn't get a sense that you've processed that emotionally.
Though personally, I find this interpretation incredibly hard to believe, since that would mean the therapist is seemingly talking to Gregory, who's like 11 or 12, about how he's some hacker who broke into the mall, and describing how the other therapists he would have talked to were brutally killed.
And apparently all 3 of your former therapists have gone missing. Or 2 of them are missing. I don't want to scare you, but I have to tell you that one of them was found dead. Well, then I guess I'll go ahead and tell you that the woman's body was pretty messed up. It looked like it was mangled by machinery. How does all of this make you feel? Maybe I should be watching my back. Yeah, that's funny, isn't it?
Why would you talk to a small child about that? That makes no sense. Others think that it's someone else still. However, I always just thought that the therapy tapes were talking to one person, not two. And I always found this to be an obvious representation of how Glitchtrap is taking over Vanessa's mind and literally changing her personality. Of course she's not going to act the same when you have a serial killer possessing your brain and suddenly controlling and changing you. Also, I literally know people who have days where they go silent, not speaking a word, especially with things like anxiety, which it's mentioned in the tapes that Vanny has. She's clearly under a lot of stress, so it's not crazy that some days she doesn't speak. Especially since that might be the days where Glitchtrap has more control over her or something. The tone the therapist takes on sometimes is a little odd, but in therapy, I have heard people talk about how sometimes therapists might talk in that weird childlike tone depending on the circumstances, but I'm not an expert about therapy or anything like that, so don't quote me. Anyways, these tapes provide a lot of really interesting lore tidbits for hungry theorists to peck at like birds, but they also tell you a lot about Vanny and make you feel bad for what she's going through. She's a killer, but she doesn't really want to be. She's under so much mental torment. She is the reluctant follower, after all. Reluctant follower. I think that the therapy tapes really add an interesting aspect to her character. Who knows, maybe all my theories are wrong and I'm being an idiot and I'm incorrect about Vanessa, but like, even if she is the same character as the Night Guard, or if some of my assumptions are incorrect about her, I still think that she's an interesting, compelling villain with all the lore that she's been given. I should also mention how Princess Quest is expanded upon in this game, with Princess Quest 1, 2, and 3 being hidden and playable throughout the game. An allegory for Vanny and Glitchtrap. The games are key for saving Vanny from Glitchtrap's control, and I think they have a lot of interesting and fun lore elements hidden inside of them. There are a few other playable arcade games in SB as well, Balloon Boy's Quest and Monty's Gator Golf. I think it's a fun detail to hide minigames inside of certain arcade machines. It's just fun. I think this applies to some of people's story complaints as well, but long story short, even if Vanny's portrayal didn't happen the way you expected it or wanted it to, it doesn't mean that the story in the game is bad. A lot happens, and it does a good job of keeping you invested and active in the game, while utilizing a whole lot of creative and interesting ideas. This is a really good game with a pretty fun plot and a really cool villain.
Security Breach's graphics are bad and unpolished.
Okay, this is an argument that just fucking baffles me because this is the best looking FNAF game. Sorry, no contest. I've already gone over how amazing and detailed all the environments are. I can't imagine people actually believing this game's graphics look bad. For the size of this game, which it's pretty big, it's a mall with 8 stories if you count the basement levels, and it has an incredible amount of detail when you look at everything in it. Also, despite the size of this game, Steelwool is like a pretty relatively small game team. They have around 84 people total working at Steelwool right now, so like, of course the game isn't as polished as like a AAA studio game with hundreds of employees working on them. People are expecting like AAA game studio quality out of a relatively small team. I think people's expectations were so high because if you have a PS5 and a graphics card, you can have ray tracing and advanced lighting and graphics in your game. And of course, this looks fucking incredible in all the trailers and stuff. But when the game actually came out, 99% of players did not have the ray tracing because it's more expensive and complicated. So people complained about, hey, my graphics don't look as good as the trailer, which was for a far more expensive setup with the extra graphics in it. When really, the game still looks pretty fucking good without the advanced graphics. I think it's a little silly to complain about it, especially since, again, as Steelwool updated the game and patched things, they've gone back and added more visual effects and made it look nicer. They were kind of made to rush this game out after developing it for so long because they wanted to keep adding more and more great stuff to the game, but FNAF fans are impatient, whiny, screaming babies who didn't want to wait even longer for a new FNAF game. But they were able to add more of the visual effects they wanted with these updates. Like the smoke effects in the parts and surface upgrade room, for example. Also, as an artist, it really fucking boils my blood when people complain about game graphics nowadays, because most of the time, people don't understand how they fucking work. Just because something isn't fucking hyper-realistic and every model has a million fucking polygons doesn't mean that it's bad. What makes graphics good or bad is how well they fit into the game in question, and this can change depending on the game's tone and needs. Stylization is good, actually. As long as the graphics are good enough to tell what everything is and it looks like it fits in the world of the specific game franchise, it's fine. Like, older FNAF games aren't hyper-realistic, While the animatronics have kind of a cartoony style, they still look real enough to be believable, especially with the different textures and stuff, but like, if you look at William Afton's face in Fnaf 3, for example, it's not the most realistic thing, but it still works for that game and its style, because Fnaf is set in a real-seeming world, but it still has kind of fantastical elements, like ghosts and shit. You don't see people fucking complaining about the graphics in, like, Sonic Adventure 2 or older games like that, despite praising those games for being oh so amazing. But now with modern games, everyone expects things to look like a live-action movie when not only can that hurt the playing experience, but it can slow the game way the fuck down and inhibit gameplay. Another example that boils my fucking blood is when people complained about Pokemon. Oh yeah, the graphics aren't fucking hyper-realistic or good enough. I'm sorry, but if Pokemon Scarlet and Violet looked like Detective Pikachu or some shit, it would have taken away from the amazing experience that game was. Please stop crying that every tree doesn't have as much fucking bark on it as you want it to. Older Pokemon games like Pokepark didn't have fucking hyper-realism on every tree, but y'all don't complain about older Pokemon games because Pokemon fans judge quality purely on nostalgia. And don't fucking come at me about this. I've played Pokemon all my life, and I've played games from all the generations. It's just that people think, oh, the games I played when I was a 10-year-old were great, but now that I'm an adult and hypercritical about everything, it sucks. Please shut up. The last argument I want to argue against is that I've had people tell me that this game is overpriced, but it really isn't. When it first came out, it was $40, but you can get it for cheaper now. It is 2/3 the price of a standard video game, so it's relatively way cheaper than other games on store shelves. And honestly, for the size of the game and the years and years of work that went into it, I would feel bad paying anything less than like $30 or $35 for it. I hate capitalism as much as the next guy, but like, game devs deserve to be paid, guys, and this game is really fairly priced, so I don't know why people make such a big fuss over it. Maybe this is just because I buy games like Sonic or Pokemon, which are $60, or if you want older Pokemon games, it could be even over $100 for a single game. But when I heard Security Breach was only $40, I was really pleasantly surprised. And when you take into consideration that now it has free DLC that's basically a free bonus game that comes with multiple hours of gameplay, that feels like a steal. Like, if Security Breach was actually a soulless cash grab, it wouldn't have had any thought put into the story, it would have been rushed out way sooner, and it would have been $60, and the Ruin DLC would have been like 15 additional bucks. And speaking of the Ruin DLC, it's probably about time that I started talking about that. Ruin is the DLC for Security Breach, and honestly, people tend to love this thing, even haters of Security Breach. It is kind of fucking annoying how people say, oh, Ruin is the one good part of Security Breach, or that it's a great DLC for a horrible game, when Ruin gameplay-wise is really not that different to Security Breach. The gameplay is pretty much the same, with the controls being very similar, the graphics being the same, and I'm sorry, but there are just as many bugs in Ruin as there is in Security Breach. I feel like if you dislike Security Breach, it's kinda hypocritical not to hate Ruin too, but maybe I'm being a hater. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions. I'm glad if Ruin can help people like Security Breach, even a little bit. I'm just sour that everyone acts so silly about it. It drives me insane! Anyways, Ruin is fantastic, but it's also best appreciated in combination with Security Breach, because the whole point of it is the contrast between Gregory and Cassie's stories. See, Ruin takes place long after Security Breach, when the mall has been, well, ruined, and Cassie is lured inside by who she thinks is Gregory. The whole point of Ruin is that it plays the opposite of Security Breach. Instead of vast, wide, open areas you can run around in, Cassie's confined to a claustrophobic path that literally only has one way forward. She cannot hide in small spaces like Gregory can, nor does she get any of the upgrades he gets with his weapons, flashlights, stamina, etc. But Cassie is honestly in way less danger than Gregory was, technically speaking. Sure, she's wandering into a fucking death trap, story-wise, but gameplay-wise, there are only a few parts where you can really die. I feel like you have to try really hard or be really bad at it to die as Cassie, whereas Gregory needed all those upgrades because Security Breach was genuinely pretty difficult at times. The environment Cassie faces are all dilapidated and torn down and scary, which contrasts the big, bright areas of Security Breach. I've seen people complain that, see, Security Breach is bad because Ruin is 10 times scarier, but, honestly, if Ruin came out on its own without Security Breach, I doubt Security Breach haters would have liked it, because you can't appreciate Ruin's environments without having experienced the environments in Security Breach. Like, if you never walked through the daycare area in Security Breach or in the theater room next to it, I doubt entering this destroyed version would have had as much impact, you know? By being allowed the chance to experience how the place is supposed to be first, it makes exploring the destroyed version all the more impactful. It's also cool how much Ruin implements environmental storytelling without using any dialogue or words at all. Whether that's the very literal story that's being told from the cardboard cutouts showing Cassie's sad, emotional backstory, or from smaller details, claw marks on the wall where you can assume Monty was, the graffiti on the wall showing how many troublemakers have broken in, which, incidentally, can give really cool subtle instruction and foreshadowing depending on what's written. The sheer state of everything, it tells a story. And don't get me wrong, I love Ruin and its environment, but it's kind of funny that it's a very basic as a horror game setup. Oh no, an abandoned dark building. That's never been done before, and everyone praises it for being scarier. No hate to abandoned buildings in horror, it can work great, it's just a little annoying because I think Security Breach had to be a lot more creative to make its environment scary, where Ruin is scary from the mere matter of fact that abandoned places are creepy, and people act like Security Breach is so much worse than it. There are a few new mechanics that make Ruin super fun and interesting and unique on its own though, most notably Vanny's mask. Early on, Cassie finds and puts on Vanny's mask from Help Wanted, which is kind of horrific. It plants a fucking chip in her brain, and now suddenly she can see all the shit that isn't there and hears voices that aren't there. That's scary as fuck, and it creates a sort of dramatic irony since Cassie herself is clueless as to what this mask is for, or the entire backstory of how it's bad, but you as the audience, if you played the previous game, should know how fucked up that is. The mask can help you a lot during the gameplay, but not only is it a fucked up environment to be in for too long, but if you do have the mask on for more than necessary, Glitch Trap will appear. Or at least this game's version of Glitch Trap, known as the Entity, or MXES. This helps to create more interesting tension with the gameplay. There's a helpful tool which at times is necessary to proceed in certain areas, but if you use it too much, Glitch Trap will summon an animatronic threat to your area. Ruin's gameplay has more of a focus on solving puzzles to get past areas, with the interesting parent node disabling plot, which slowly turns more horrifying once you realize that Cassie is disabling the mall's security systems. Ruin is also surprisingly funny to me entirely because of Cassie. She contrasts with Gregory's personality and seems less of a troublemaker than he is, but she's got her own personality and attitude that make her really enjoyable.
Eyeballs? Really? Gross, 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 gross!
The way she interacts with the mall can be really endearing. Also, nothing is funnier to me than the sketchiness of this entire DLC. Everything about this place screams, horrible idea, and they drop hints towards this without it being too obvious. Of course, if you sit and think about it too long, you'll realize, walking in here is probably a bad idea, but everything in the game urges Cassie to keep going. I really enjoy how tragic Cassie's character is. Her backstory is really sad and heartfelt. A girl excited for her birthday, but she ends up sobbing alone when none of her friends show up. Gregory comforts her, and from this we can assume that he became her friend, most likely her only friend, since no one liked her enough to celebrate her birthday. But then Gregory goes missing, is likely assumed dead, and she's left alone again. Sure, you might think at first that it's a little stupid to blindly follow Gregory's voice into this hellhole, but I can imagine she's not thinking the clearest. She's so desperate for her only friend to be okay again that she's willing to overlook the red flags of this place. Helpy and the Vanny Network's messages encourage her to hurry on. Often at times it seems like they're trying to rush her, not give her the opportunity to think. Hurry, don't you want to save Gregory? He's in trouble, go now. Don't even think about it. Just act. I also love the Gregory voice on the Roxy talkie, which is just Mimic trying to lure Cassie away. At first, it's pretty convincing, if not a little suspicious.
Help! Something grabbed me! It won't let me go! You have to find me! I'm trapped in the sinkhole under the raceway!
But the further you go on, the weirder it gets. Gregory starts being more demanding, telling Cassie to hurry up and piping up if you haven't progressed at the speed of a fucking speed runner.
Well, what are you waiting for?
His voice can be heard when you're using the mask, overwhelming you and shouting instructions in a confusing yet urgent way.
Find the generator. Find it. Turn on the lights. Hurt him. He hates it. Hates the light. Daycare attendant hates the light.
As the game progresses, you can tell how doctored and fake Gregory's voice sounds, a subtle detail which I really love. You can blatantly tell that it's just different clips of his voice stitched together, his tone completely changing on different words that have been taken from different recordings of his dialogue. When you're walking through the party rooms in Roxy Raceway is when this is the most obvious, and it made me laugh at how fake it sounds.
Cassie, can you hear me? I finally have a clear signal. Almost. There's still one node left that's keeping the underground sealed.
Where?
Roxy's the final node. I need to deactivate her.
But...
Deactivate her and save me. Save me, Cassie, please. It's so dark down here.
There's also a part that cracks the fuck out of me, and it's really clever, when the Mimic takes a line that Gregory says very early on in Security Breach and just plays the literal exact recording of that same line.
The stupid door won't open.
The stupid door won't open.
Well, it looks like someone poured concrete over the door. How am I supposed to get rid of concrete?
Yeah, Cassie, it's not suspicious at all. Someone totally poured concrete casually over the door that Gregory's inside!
I don't know where else to stick this, but one more small detail that I love about Ruin is all of the jump scares. They are animated in such a unique way where we actually see Cassie's arms fighting back unsuccessfully against the animatronics. It's a subtle but cool detail that I don't think Fnaf has ever really done before, so it's really cool.
Cassie walks into this hellhole and helps the enemies access her more easily, digging her own grave. A child walking blindly towards their death. What a great concept for a horror game. Ruin is so cool.
You said it, Ruin is fantastic, with even creepier imagery and lots of stuff to enjoy. All the more reason to play it and Security Breach in my opinion. I feel like I'm gonna be burned at the stake for this, but I do have some controversial opinions about Ruin though. Like, I genuinely think the Security Breach is more fun to play than Ruin. I don't know why, maybe it's just the Security Breach gives you more breaks from the tense action, so it makes it easier for me to play, and makes those creepy moments really hit. And also they just give you more freedom to explore and do whatever you want. But Ruin is not bad by any means, it's great. It also has a ton of super interesting lore and does a wonderful job at storytelling. Before we finish up our discussion for good, one last thing I want to talk about is one more final misconception/theory that's in Ruin. The whole time, it turns out that it wasn't actually Gregory luring Cassie into the mall. It was something known as the Mimic. This robot has the ability to mimic the voices and behaviors of others, which was how it was able to mimic Gregory. I actually remember the instant the first teaser image for Ruin dropped, my boyfriend Buggy said, "I don't trust Gregory at all, that's not Gregory." And I looked at the image and I said, maybe, but I can't say anything for sure just from this one teaser image. But then as soon as the game started, I was proven wrong because the entire deal with Gregory is shady as fuck and sounds fake. So yeah, it's not really a surprise that this isn't Gregory. After the Mimic reveals itself in a creepy segment, then Cassie hears what she assumes is the real Gregory humming from her Roxy talkie. And this voice attempts to lead her to her death in a segment where Gregory tries to kill Cassie. Now, I'm not going to deny that there is some possibility that this is the real Gregory, but believe it or not, I have my doubts that this is actually Gregory either. Are you really gonna trust some random-ass voice telling you, "Hey, I'm Gregory," after being tricked to that extent? How big of a signal does this walkie-talkie get? If Gregory's truly so far away from the mall, how the hell would he ever be able to talk to her? Walkie-talkies do not have that big of a range, I'm sorry. If Gregory's outside the mall miles and miles away while Cassie's dozens of feet underground in the mall, there's no way those walkie-talkies would have any signal. Also, Gregory is simply acting out of character here. Again, in Security Breach, Gregory was selfless. He literally chose to walk back into the mall and pursue its mysteries, knowing it was dangerous and he could die, because he didn't want any more kids to die. and now I'm suddenly supposed to believe that Gregory is sacrificing innocent kids for his own safety? Not even just an innocent kid, but a good friend of his? I don't know. Again, it is possible that it is the real Gregory, but even if it is, I've seen a lot of people using Gregory tries to kill Cassie as evidence that he's like evil and the worst character or something. He's just a kid who narrowly escaped death, and so if he's fearing his life and trying to prevent something dangerous from following him, I do understand the logic, and I don't think he's fucking evil. It's not like he wants to kill Cassie, his hand is just being forced. But then again, I doubt that it's Gregory at all. I'll be honest, I don't know how to perfectly explain everything in Ruin, and y'all can make your own theories about it, but I'm not sure how much I trust any of it. But yeah, Ruin is a really interesting and well put together DLC, with a ton of interesting lore and hidden secrets within. This series certainly knows how to start a conversation, that's for sure. I could honestly keep going on and on about this game and why it's so great, but I've kind of been talking for a while, and I think I've established all my main points that I wanted to say. At the beginning of this video, I talked about the quality of a game being determined by analyzing the sum of all of its parts, and I think when you look at all of Security Breach's parts, you'll find there's tons more good stuff than there is bad stuff. Security Breach is a great game, with a story that keeps you hooked, gameplay that's fun with a lot of different elements that makes it challenging and interesting to play, characters that get you invested in the story, and a huge, detailed, awesome environment chock full of secrets to explore. You can nitpick and complain about bugs or minor flaws or how you don't like the story, but in my opinion, the good far outweighs the bad, and the game is a delight overall.
I love Five Nights at Freddy's. It definitely delivers on the creepy factor with the cool murderer villains, the dark, scary way that it builds its environments, and the danger that the characters find themselves in.
I still think it's a poorly written mess.
You know what? That's fine. Not everyone needs to like this game or even think that it's good. But it was so fun for me to ramble about it for an hour.
Actually, it's been 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah, sorry, but you know what? It's my channel and I can info dump about whatever I want. It's the least that I deserve after watching other people angrily rant about how this game sucks. I love being the positive contrarian and ranting about why it's good, actually.
Are we done here?
Yeah, it's kind of been a long video.
Yeah, I guess I'll see you freaks later.
Bye-bye!
Anyways, I hope that this was at least entertaining to someone out there, even if it got a little more heated than usual. I love Fnaf, and I'm very passionate about it, and I'd love to talk more about it in the future, alongside my Sonic content, which, don't worry, that will continue. Thank you all so much for watching all the way to the end of this video. If you ever want to see me talk about more of these types of topics, you should leave your suggestions below.
Bye!